Hey guys, Sly here, and welcome back to another episode of the Caspian Game Awards. So, we're back! Oh my god, it's been like, actually since the beginning of the month since I've actually streamed anything, though there's been a lot that's just kind of happened throughout this month that I really do not want to get into. But, we're finally doing it, we're finally catching up, and we are doing 2025's Caspian Game Awards. So, I'm actually pretty excited for this because I've done a lot of research, and after all that's happened throughout this last year, I think I'm at a point where I finally feel comfortable for this to be the official list or like the official awards ceremony. So, before we get into this, just a bit of background for this. For those who don't know, the Caspian Game Awards, it started off as basically a weekly podcast series that I did back in 2024, where I went from 2023 back, and I pretty much, did my own award ceremony show, because let's just say I have a lot of criticisms about the modern Game Awards, which thankfully some of that was rectified with 2025's Game Awards, but obviously we'll talk about that in a second. But no, this is just kind of giving my own perspective on what I think what type of games should have gotten a bunch of recognition, or games that I do agree with that did get recognition, and I'm just going to showcase what I think is what I agree with. And, it's going to basically just kind of be like my sort of top 10 games of 2025 in a sort of sense. I do actually do that near the very end, but I do want to also give a ton of recognition to pretty much every game. So, suffice to say, I'm hella excited about getting into this. Now, that being said, before we actually get into this, I actually do want to just say a few things. So, yes, I know I said I was going to do a stream last week, but first of all, school started up again, and so because of that, my schedule is going to be a bit awkward as far as trying to do like Twitch streams and stuff. So there's that. Also, I apologize if you guys can hear something. Our washer and dryer in this apartment was kind of being awkward, and so there's some people who are working on that right now. Hopefully that gets fixed. But anyways, and so, but I know I did mention this as well in some of the other streams I did last month. I just want to say thank you to everyone who has kind of stuck around with me, because I'll be honest, for me personally, 2025 ended up becoming a bit of a nightmare year. There were some good things that happened last year, don't get it twisted, but I was definitely in a bit of a dark spot, the last couple of months, and I'll even admit this month hasn't particularly been the easiest, but I just want to give a special shout out especially to my friends Goldie and Saimori, because they've been the ones who have supported me the most, and I'm just very thankful for everyone who has just kind of supported me, because 2025 ended up being kind of a shit year for me personally. So, but let's not be neither here nor there. Let's actually talk about the year as far as video games, which, if you guys remember last year, I did do a tier list episode on ranking, the video game years, and I did include 2025. I did put it in a C tier. I'll be honest, my assumptions about 2025 ending up being kind of a lame year ended up being correct, unfortunately. Yeah, this year ended up unfortunately being not good. So yeah, like, it sucks to say, but I'm gonna be honest, 2025 was not a good year. I mean, don't get it twisted. Obviously, there were some games that were absolutely fantastic that came out this year, and we'll be talking about those in this episode, or in this, Game Awards show. But this was really the year that did, unfortunately, we started seeing the real ramifications of AI generated content in a lot of video games. And that unfortunately ruined a lot of games, including games that I was rooting for, which we'll get into in a second. Not only that, but also there were very few games this year that I would argue were like I was super excited for. Like there wasn't like a game like a Helldivers this year, or an Elden Ring, or Red Dead Redemption 2. There's one game which obviously I'll get to once we get to the end of this. But I'm not gonna lie, this was just kind of a dry year as far as like games that really at least grabbed my attention personally. But unfortunately, a lot of people online I've seen similar consensus for, which sucks because 2024, yes, it had its problems, it had its concords, it had its skull and bones, but I thought that 2024 was actually not that bad of a year. And 2023, when we actually started the series, I thought that was actually a really good year. So, but I guess this just kind of proves the whole, every 2 to 4 years we get a dud year. So, and well, this unfortunately is another symptom of that. Now, that said, obviously, I did mention that this started off as me being very critical of the Game Awards. And obviously, we reacted to the Game Awards last month. Did they improve? Yes. But unfortunately, in hindsight, there is one massive caveat that unfortunately does kind of ruin at least the award parts of the Game Awards. The actual show itself was good. I'd argue the best it's been in a long time. And I'm being serious when I say that, because the past 7 or 8 years of the Game Awards have just been kind of lame. Especially 2024. I fucking hated 2024. Jesus Christ. But 2025 was a much improved show. Unfortunately, though, while yes, my initial reactions were good, I should have taken my friend's Nate's concerns in hindsight a bit more, because this is something that I've talked about with him, as well as Goldie and Sai, about the nomination process. And unfortunately, we're gonna see a lot of examples of hoodie-itis on this. Hoodie-itis being the worst choice in a game, in a award ceremony, being the winner. So we'll talk about that in a second, but right now let's just jump right into this. So of course, let's go over the rules, because this is how the nomination process for this Game Awards show that I have goes through, for those who are not in the know. So, as far as the actual nomination process, it has to be a game that released between January 1st and December 31st of that year. We're not like the Grammys, so...
Don't yell at me, yell at the Grammys.
We're not the Grammys, we don't do weird cutoff dates, and we're not like the regular Game Awards where they don't have games from a December count, even though they should, but whatever. We count the entire year. And, since we're including games that literally came out last month here, admittedly that is a bit more difficult to judge, but I feel confident in what I have chosen here to feel like that the games that I have nominated are respectable. So, also, we try to make sure that we have games that had a decent to good launch on here. We don't like having games that had a terrible launch but were fixed after the fact. Though, unfortunately, kind of like 2022, this year kind of kneecapped that, so there are going to be a few games on here that may have been fixed after the fact, but I'll go over the specifics on that once we get to those. Also, no early access games, so no games that were in beta, alpha, or pre-alpha are applicable here. So unfortunately, that does mean that Path of Exiles 2, as much as I think that game's awesome, it does not count for this list because it has not officially released yet. So yeah. Also, we try to make sure that we have at least 4 nominations and only up to 6 per category. the initial release is counted. So we're not just doing North American releases or re-releases. The initial release of a game is the one counted, although that's kind of a rule that's not really as applicable anymore. That one's definitely more of a thing for like a lot of the Game Awards that we did for the 90s and the 2000s, but I digress. Also, one game per franchise per nomination. Also, yeah, DLCs and expansions has to be for games not released this year. So any game that came out in 2023, 2024, and had DLCs that come out in 2025, we'll count those. And this is a very important point. I made sure to emphasize this point actually in the last Game Awards, and unfortunately, in hindsight, I did not do enough research on some of the games that I ended up nominating. No games with AI art are allowed in this, and that is a extremely important point because in a second, I'm unfortunately going to have to disqualify a ton of games from 2025 because they got caught using AI art. And some of the disqualifications are going to piss people off, and I'm even pissed off about some of them, but we'll get to that. So, but yeah, those are the general nomination rules. Then we have Game of the Year, which of course needs to be a generally liked game to be accepted, and if absolutely necessary, I'm just going to nominate games that I personally liked. So, which of course, again, this year, it's probably going to have to be that. So, and also no remakes or remasters. They have their own category. They're not a completely new game. So, yeah. Also, keep in mind, these are games that only I'm personally interested in because this is a biased show, but you should know that by now that I have 35 other episodes for you to watch to know exactly how this process goes. But unfortunately, I have to make this disclaimer now because I had done a huge spew of research for like the past 3 months trying to figure out what games have AI art and which games do not have AI art. And unfortunately, there were a ton of games that released just in 2025 alone that got a lot of attention, whether positive or negative, that in good faith and by my principles, I cannot nominate because it sets a very, very bad precedent if I were to nominate these games. And unfortunately, these are some of the games that even I defended until they got caught using this shit. So, let's just show the list. Yeah. This is really bad, people. Again, some of these games I didn't necessarily care for anyways. Like, the Altars I didn't care for at all. I don't know, it just wasn't my thing. Black Ops 7 was not very good. Trust me, I streamed it last month. It was terrible, so that wouldn't have been nominated anyways. But then we got the games that I will admit are going to be a bit more controversial, and I know there's going to be people who are going to be pissed that I'm not nominating these games. But I have to rip the Band-Aid and just, unfortunately, state the elephant in the room. Arc Raiders, Battlefield 6, and Clair Obscur Expedition 33, unfortunately, cannot be qualified for this list. Okay, so with Arc Raiders, yes, I know that it was an extraction shooter that got popular, which, I mean, that's already kind of one thing that I wouldn't have done anyways, because I'm not a big fan of extraction shooters. But it's more than just the text-to-speech, the voice modulators. There are AI cutscenes in the game. So even if you want to argue with me that the voice modulation and the voice trainers that they used was, the consent was given by the voice actors for them to use their voice in that, well, you can make that excuse. You can't make the excuse of the AI-generated cutscenes in the game, though, for, like, the characters and stuff. You can't do that on me. And also, keep in mind, this is the same team that made the finals, which also ended up using a lot of just straight up AI voices in that game. And so this is just a studio I do not trust. I'm sorry, but it is the truth. And then we get the two games that I'm actually the most pissed off about that I found out that they ended up having AI art in them. So, and let's start with Battlefield 6. This, spoiler alert, I thought was a slam dunk. It was a slam dunk. Vince Zampella, rest in peace, was the one in charge of this game. I had a ton of fun playing the beta, and I had a ton of fun when they did the free weekend, like what, a month or two ago. It was a fantastic experience, and a much better game overall compared to 2042, especially at launch. And yes, you can have your arguments of whether or not the maps are too small, or if the gunplay feels a bit too similar to Call of Duty's. That doesn't matter. As a game, it's fantastic. And then they had to pull the bullshit involving the AI emblems in the game, which unfortunately I did not have enough time to actually I didn't have enough time to actually add that to the slide, and also because I kind of don't want to showcase this anyways. But like, unfortunately, and this is the thing that pissed me off, and I think I mentioned this in one of my more recent streams. So yeah, this was an AI generated image right here. This got added in a post-launch update. It's the same thing that happened with Black Ops 6 in the previous year. But here's the insulting part. They added that literally 2 days after Vince Zampella died. I'm gonna be honest, that is probably the most disgusting and disrespectful fucking shit ever. The fact that they released that shit immediately after he died is fucked up. And that makes me super fucking mad and upset, because I've been waiting for a Battlefield game of like a good quality for years. But now I can't trust Battlefield anymore. If I can't trust Call of Duty for the same reasons, I can't trust Battlefield. I have to be consistent with my principles. And now I don't care about Battlefield anymore. And that makes me sad, because I love Battlefield. Battlefield 4 is one of my favorite games of all time. Same thing with Battlefield 2. Hell, last year around this time, 2 years ago, I just streamed Battlefield 1942 maps. Just because I wanted to. But no, now I can't fucking trust anything coming out of DICE anymore, because now I'm afraid whatever they're going to cook out is just going to be AI crap. And we saw the ramifications that had with Black Ops 7 last year. I really do not want that to go down with Battlefield 6. It makes me so fucking mad that they did that. But unfortunately, that's not the biggest crime. Unfortunately, the biggest crime is the fact that Claire Obscure Expedition 33 got caught using AI assets in their game. Yes, I know there's going to be people who are going to decry, oh, it was just background assets. Okay, doesn't matter. If you have placeholder or background assets, guess what? A, make sure that it's not AI generated to begin with. But B, guess what? Garry's Mod, or really just any Valve game, source engine game. What they have as placeholder textures are the black and pink textures that they use in every single one of their source games. They use that as their placeholders to make sure that, yes, they have the general geometry laid out in their game, but also to make sure that that's where they need to place a texture. There's no excuse. And unfortunately, that's why, unfortunately, the 2025 Game Awards ended up getting ruined. Because this game alone ended up getting 13 nominations and 9 wins. So, yeah, I'm really sorry, guys, but I have to stick to my principles. I cannot support a game that got caught using like generative AI like assets at its launch or post launch. I'm fine if you use it to help with like here's the thing. I'm not completely against the use of like AI tools cuz that's fine. It's when you use it as a crutch and you use it in place of assets that could just be used by hand is whenever I have a problem with it. Claire Obscure Expedition 33 unfortunately got caught doing that. And so, and that makes me upset because, again, okay, that's the washer they're trying to fix, as I mentioned earlier. But you get my point, is that they, like, if you need placeholders, just use a texture like a lot of Valve games do. Or, if you, like, if you really need to use AI, like, you know, textures and shit, make sure that you actually fix that shit before you launch your game. Because those were in the game for like a good couple of weeks. That's why they ended up getting disqualified for every other Game Awards ceremony, like post the 2025 Game Awards. So, again, I know that one's gonna get a lot of people pissed at me for, but I have to stick to my guns. And thankfully, I'm not the only one who thinks that. A bunch of other people agree with me. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, but I cannot, in good faith, give this game credit because it sets a very bad precedent. And unfortunately, we're going to have to talk about that precedent a lot tonight. So, but yeah, no, as for the other games, Tainted Grail and Anno 117, they got caught using like AI art as well, which makes me sad. Same thing with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 plus 4 remake. It's like, why are you, it's a remake, what the fuck? And then Where Winds Meet, that got caught using like AI generated voices. So, and keep in mind, these are just the games that got caught. And there's actually a few games on here that I already have put like asterisks next to them because they haven't been confirmed that they got caught using AI, but I have concerns for. So, because here's the other thing. Unfortunately, in our 2023 and 2024 Game Awards, unfortunately, there were some games that did slip through the cracks, including a game that I ended up giving a win. And so, unfortunately, that is going to have to make me prioritize more of like doing a whole Redux stream. I said that I might do that. Now I have to do that. So, granted, that's probably going to be months later, but that's how much I despise AI art. In AI like voice acting, I cannot, in good faith, promote that shit. So, yeah, and like I said, unfortunately, it already fucked up a lot of the awards that we ended up giving over. So, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to start redacting a lot of awards that we gave in the 2023 and 2024 Caspian Game Awards. So, but that's a story for another time. Let's just start getting into the actual things. So, these are the categories that we have. Best Indie Game, Action Adventure, Platform, RPG, Shooter, Sim Strategy, Multiplayer, DLC, Expansion, Remake/Remaster, Best Art Direction, Narrative, and Game of the Year. Let's just jump into it, because we already wasted a lot of time. So, Best Indie Game. So, this is the one that's supposed to represent the small dogs. You know, like either up-and-coming studios or studios that are not necessarily funded by big budget. Did the Game Awards actually respect that? Well, kind of, but unfortunately, as we're going to get into, not so much. So, okay, so first of all, I'd say this is a fair selection of games. We'll address the elephant in the room after we talk about other games. But first of all, Absolem. That, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting what this is. Oh, it's the beat 'em up. Sorry, there's a lot of games I have to go through, like tonight. It's if I do like miss a game or if I misremember a game, I do sincerely apologize. But anyways, Absolem. Yes, this is like a roguelike beat 'em up that has like it has an okay art style. I guess the problem for me is that you're talking to someone who's not really the biggest roguelike person, like most roguelike fan out there. I have gotten a bit more used to the genre as like the years have come by. As a matter of fact, last month I did actually end up getting a decent amount of games on my actual Steam account. I got Inscription, I got Dead Cells, I got Cult of Lamb, and I got the original Hades. So, and I think those games are fine, but those are like the only exceptions. I don't know. It's not really a genre that's for me. So, I don't know. So, that said, though, I do respect its art direction and all that fun stuff. And then we got Ball Pit, or Ball X Pit, as some people have been calling it. I'm pretty sure this one's also a rogue. Yeah, this one's also roguelike, although this one is one that's like less interesting to me even more than Absolem, because it's like you're playing Arkanoid as a roguelike, or at least like a variant of Arkanoid. If you guys even know what the hell that game is, it's the one where it's like you shoot a ball and it like bounces around. That's basically what it is. It's not my thing. I'm sorry, it just really isn't. So if I had to choose between the two, I'd rather choose Absolem. So, but then we've got ourselves a game that I actually do respect, Blueprints. This is a puzzle sort of adventure hybrid game, and as you can see, it has like a cool like blue motif going on, hence the name. I think it's actually a pretty cool concept. I know I said that I'm not like the biggest puzzle guy out there, but this did kind of remind me of the game Myst from 32 years ago. Holy shit! Where it's a lot more of an adventure puzzle hybrid game, and so I definitely see it as like an evolution of that. And so because of that, I respect it a lot. So yeah, I'd say this one makes sense. And then, of course, we've got ourselves, in the back too, we've got ourselves some pretty big hitters. Hades 2, officially released in 2025. It was in early access in 2024, but it didn't fully come out until last year. And yeah, no, it was worth the wait. I mean, again, it's another roguelike, but the difference between this and the other games is that, I mean, I already mentioned this with the original Hades in our 2020 Caspian Game Awards. It's a lot more forgiving because it has a it's called God mode. It's not actually God mode. It's more of a easy mode. And as someone who just fucking hates roguelikes, I like games that actually have those types of features because it makes the monotony a lot less annoying for me. And well, Hades 2, they brought that back. It's a bit more of a challenging game, but it is still very much easily accessible compared to other games in its genre. And more importantly, it doesn't actually follow the same story as Hades 1. Like, you're playing as a completely different demigod, and you have a bunch of new abilities. It doesn't completely reinvent the wheel for what Hades 1 did. It's just a solid game overall. And so I definitely see this being on here. Even if it's questionable that Supergiant is even an indie game studio anymore, I'd argue at this point they're more of a AA studio, but that gets into semantics. But then we got ourselves probably the most hyped game for this year that wasn't GTA 6. Hollow Knight Silk Song. The game that was amongst one of the what I call the meme sequels, where it was just out of the news for a long time and just never got its sequel until this year. So it was up there with Half-Life 3. It was up there with Splinter Cell, whatever. It was up in that meme territory. Beyond Good and Evil 2 as well. But I can comfortably say that it was much worth the wait. And if you guys saw on my Steam, I actually ended up getting this around Christmas time. And I can definitely say that, yes, no, it was absolutely worth it. And I can see this being on the list. Because holy shit, is this game really goddamn awesome. It helps that I do prefer Metroidvania style games rather than roguelikes, so it's a hard as hell game, though. Do keep that in mind. But it's still a lot of fun. So, yeah. Clear. Okay. I said this even in our whenever I was reacting to the Game Awards for you guys. I don't like how Claire Obscure is on here. Like, even just putting aside that it got caught using AI assets, it's not an indie game. It's a AA game at best. Because here's the thing about Claire Obscure, is that it was made by a lot of ex-Ubisoft developers. I mean, it's a French game. Ubisoft's from France. A lot of the people who were getting tired of Ubisoft shit left, made this. Which, it's not that that's not noble, it's just the problem is that the game is way too high of a budget to be considered an indie game. If you guys remember, back in 2021, there was a game that, which I'm blanking on the name of. Holy shit, why can I not remember the game? I literally gave it an award multiple times. But, like, it just straight up looked like a Disney movie. Like, it was absolutely beautiful, but the scale was still pretty small enough to where it fit the indie category pretty well. Yeah, Ken Bridge of Spirits. That's what I consider to be, like, the baseline of what you could consider to be an indie game and, like, a AA game. It's the fine line game right there. Same thing with Hades and Hades 2. I consider those games to be, like, at the cusp of between an indie game and a AA game. Claire Obscure unfortunately crosses that line. It is way too big of a game with too high of a budget and too high of a backing for it to be considered indie. It's just not an indie game. It's not. Unfortunately, though, and this is where Hoodie-itis has to strike in. It was the winner. It's not an indie game. Like, I don't care what people say. It doesn't matter if, like, they publish the game independently. That doesn't fucking matter if it's, like, if it has, like, what, $15-20 million behind it in terms of backing? That's how much Final Fantasy VI costed back in 1994. And I didn't count that as an indie. I counted that as a AAA game. So, no, this is not an indie game. It's just not. So, yeah, no. And, of course, with that, and combined with the fact that, like, it really, like, combine that with the fact that it has AI in it, absolutely Hoodie-itis right here. I'm sorry, but it should not have been the winner of this category in any universe. So, what did I end up choosing instead? Well, Absalom, Blueprints, and Hollow Knight Soul Song are going to be on here still. Even if Absalom is not my thing, I respect it for being a beat-em-up. It stays on here. And then, of course, Blueprints and Hollow Knight Soul Song, those speak for themselves. But this one's actually going to be a bit of a wild card here, because I am also going to be nominating The Midnight Walk, which is a VR sort of puzzle adventure. It's another puzzle/adventure hybrid game. It's very similar to games like Limbo or Inside, where it has like a very macabre and borderline creepy aesthetic, but it's a sort of creepy aesthetic that I think looks cool because it looks like it's a stop motion, like claymation sort of thing that's going on here. And the fact that it's even a game that you can play in VR makes it even more impressive. So yeah, no, this, I think it got absolutely snubbed. Like, where the hell was this in, like, because this was only nominated for the VR AR category, like not even for best art direction. I don't get it. So, but no, it's a game that I think is a lot more, at least visually interesting compared to like a bunch of these other games. And well, guess what? The difference between Glare Obscure Expedition 33 is that like this was actually made by an independent studio. It was their first game, and more importantly, it wasn't released by a major publisher. Therefore, it's an indie game. So, okay, to be fair, it did win Best VR AR Game for 2025. I will give it that, but I digress. So anyways, let's get into the awards. And yes, I have an envelope. Unfortunately, it's not the one that I used for most of the series last time. I unfortunately lost that one, but my cousin ended up giving me this anyways. So, all right, here we go. All right, so prepare ourselves. We're finally giving out an actual award. So, the award for the best indie game of 2025 goes to Hollow Knight Silk Song. Shocker. I feel like this is the one that's like kind of a shoe-in, but I don't care because this one deserves it. So, and yes, we did actually no, go watch 2017. But yes, this game it took almost 9 years to come out, but it was absolutely worth it. There are very few games that have such a long development time that end up actually being worth it. This is one of those games. Why? Because, I mean, the game is absolutely beautiful. Looks as good, if not better, than the first. And that's saying a lot, because the original Hollow Knight was already a beautiful looking game. But, you know, this game improves a lot on the original Hollow Knight. It has pretty fluid controls and animation, which is something that, for a game like this, should be like, you should bring your A game in. The map is a lot more expanded. I mean, I don't think there's like any direct areas that are completely copied from the original Hollow Knight. But there's definitely a lot of like, you know, callbacks. But there's still also a lot of completely new and original areas in here. And there's more bosses that end up being a lot more engaging. So yeah, as far as a game that is independent, it's still made by only like what, 5 or 10 dudes, maybe a chick in there. I don't want to judge. Absolutely fantastic and much deserving of this. The fact that this game got snubbed is fucking sad. So that's my pick for best indie game. All right, let's move on to action adventure now. So again, this is pretty much just any game that is an action or an adventure game or a platformer, or not a platformer game. Actually, let me fix that, because that has its own category. I don't know why I did not fix that, because it should be a puzzle. There we go. I have to make sure that the tier list, or not tier list, I have to make sure that the thing doesn't get leaked. So anyways. So, and yes, this was a category that was in the Game Awards. What did they choose again? Well, not a bad selection, though some that are a bit more questionable. So first of all, let's get this out of the way. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, that came out in 2024, in December of 2024. And I mention this every single time. Yes, even if it is a fantastic game, it's weird to nominate it for 2025, because it came out, unfortunately, in the cutoff date for the actual Game Awards, which is a bit of a shame. And, well, spoilers, we did actually give it a lot of recognition for 2024, so go watch last year's Caspian Game Awards if you want to hear me talk about that game more. Right now, I don't want to necessarily focus on it. But Hollow Knight Silk Song was actually nominated for this category, which, fair enough, they didn't have a platformer category. unlike our show. And I think that's fair, but there were a bunch of other general action adventure games that I definitely think could get a lot of attention, which we'll get into once we get into the nominations. But let's talk about honestly a game that I thought would have gotten a lot more attention by from the Game Awards, but ended up just kind of getting mysteriously swept under the rug. We got Split Fiction. Now, I do remember in the 2024 Game Awards when they actually showcased this, I think I did comment on the game not necessarily looking that good. I think it's more so just the fact that it was a beta build or something, because it does look a lot its official version does look a lot better. And also, I think it's actually kind of a decent game anyways. Granted, it is just like all the other games made by the studio, because this is the same studio that made It Takes Two and A Way Out. So it's a forced co-op game. I only played a little bit of it with some of my friends just for the sake of being able to, legitimately talk about this. And I think gameplay-wise, it's actually pretty good. And I actually do think I definitely prefer this over It Takes Two, specifically for its theming. Granted, I don't love every single level in the game, but the ones that are more focused on what you see in the cover, which are the more sci-fi fantasy stuff, those definitely stick out to me a bit more. And I don't know why, I just think it's kind of funny and a little bit cute that it's the whole it's the bad girl, they don't want to do anything with this, with the one who just embraces the absurdity of this. I think it's kind of funny. So, but yeah, no, it's a decent game. So if you want a good co-op, I can see why this got nominated. And then we've got ourselves Ghost of Yotei. What the actual fuck is wrong with you, Game Awards? This game got snubbed, just like Ghost of Tsushima. This game's awesome! What? What? I'm sorry, it's it does not make sense that this ended up just getting absolutely nothing. Because this game, I think, you can argue if Tsushima was the better game. I'm not going to argue with that. But to deny that this game was even, worthy of a nomination, absolute bullshit. I think this game was absolutely deserving of, its praise. Especially since this game actually looks beautiful. And the combat, you can do a lot more, stealthy stuff in this game compared to Tsushima. I don't know. Yeah, that made me fucking mad that this game didn't even get a single award. It pissed me off. Because this game is actually pretty good. I know there's grifters online who, are fucking mad at this whole thing, but fuck them. This game's good. That said, though, yes, that does mean that the one game that is on here that I don't necessarily think... It's more so just to do with the fact that I was just not a big fan of the first game. Death Stranding 2. Yes, I know a lot of people love Kojima's work, and to be fair, I love my Metal Gear Solid. I played through Metal Gear Solids 1 and 2, and I played a decent amount of 4 and 5. I'm a Metal Gear fan. I'm not a Death Stranding fan. Cause I hated the first game because it just felt like it was just a walking sim. And while yes, a lot of those criticisms I heard that they were addressed in the sequel, it's the fact that it's still in the same story that just kind of kills it for me. So I'm sorry, but this is not my type of game. This is not. So. And I know even some of my friends, I had some friends arguing with me about this, but it's I don't care. I just don't care. I'm sorry. I just don't. And again, it's my list, so I can do whatever I want. That said, Whole Night Silk Song was the winner of this at the actual Game Awards, which is respectable. But how about we actually give some other praise to some other games that came out this year. So I'm keeping Ghosts of Yotei and Split Fiction on here, but let's get some more Japanese representation in here. So first of all, Dynasty Warriors Origins. It came out January of last year, so at the very beginning of the year. And yeah, no, this game rocks. And a return to form. Because Dynasty Warriors was kind of in a bad spot in the 2010s. 8 didn't necessarily do bad, but it was a step down compared to 6 and 7. And, well, 9 was terrible. So, yeah, and, I mean, Samurai Warriors 5, while not a bad game, it was disappointing for a lot of people. But no, this game is definitely a return to form in every single way. Fluid combat, bringing back that sense of scale in the more like stripped down maps compared to the massive over bloated open world compared to 9. Like, I think that was a smart move to like not bring that back. And this is a prequel, so it is technically this actually, I think it takes place around either before or during the same time as the original Dynasty Warriors, which, for those who don't know, was actually a fighting game. It wasn't a hack and slash like the other Dynasty Warrior games were. And so by having a game set in that same time frame, that's actually like what people think of Dynasty Warriors as, I think that's actually a pretty good move. And no, this is an awesome game. So if you want to just beat up a bunch of if you just want to beat a bunch of Three Kingdoms era, I guess technically this is before that. This is Yellow Turban Rebellion. So like if you want to just beat a bunch of like Yellow Turban Rebellion dudes, this game's for you. So yeah. And then we got a game that also kind of went under the radar later on in the year. Like, it got a lot of marketing and a lot of people were talking about it, but it kind of just We got Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. So this is a spin-off of Yakuza / Like a Dragon. And it technically is like it's a spin-off / continuation of Infinite Wealth's story, Dynasty, or not, Yakuza 8, if you want to call it Yakuza 8. I don't know. And it's set in the modern day, but around Hawaii, and you follow Nazame in where he basically thinks he's a pirate, and you actually make a pirate crew. It's stupid, it's absurd, but I love it. It's like the best pirate game we've ever had, even though you're not actually like in pirate times. It's absurd, it's over the top. It's basically what Skull and Bones should have been, if you catch my drift. So if you want more pirate stuff, go check this game out. So, and then we got a game that I'm actually genuinely surprised was not even nominated. Silent Hill F. Yeah, no, this game was just straight up not nominated, which I find extremely bizarre, because, I mean, obviously Silent Hill 2's remake came out last year, and then they finally make a prequel game, release like another Silent Hill game proper this year. And it is surprising me that they just didn't consider putting it under action adventure. I guess it's not really like an action game, it's a survival horror game, but we count survival horror games in this category. I think it's a really good game. Yes, it's not set in the titular town, but that's not the point. The point is to just kind of showcase the origin of like that curse. And, well, this game's fucking creepy, and I think this game is absolutely fantastic in a lot of ways. It brings back a lot of that horror from Silent Hill that we've needed for a long time. So, yeah, no, I'd say this is definitely a game that should be nominated here. And then, last but not least, speaking of long-awaited sequels, Ninja Gaiden 4 finally released in the year of our Lord 2025. Keep in mind, Ninja Gaiden 3 came out back in 2012. 2012! And they finally released this game after such a long time. And it's pretty cool. It's definitely a lot more of a refinement compared to 3, because 3 had a lot of narrative problems and it had a lot of awkward controls, which the first 2 Ninja Gaidens of like the reboot, they didn't have that problem. So for them to go back to that Ninja Gaiden like 2 style, I think was absolutely worth it. And I don't know, it's just a fun time. That's all I gotta say. So, also, yeah, I just realized a lot of games that are either Japanese games or like Japanese themed on here. Ghost of Yotei is not actually a Japanese game. It's made by Sucker Punch, the same people who made My Boy, my favorite game of all time. But like, and of course, Split Fiction is like a Western studio. But yeah, it's so interesting. So, because I guess I just more so associate a lot of Japanese games with RPGs. So it's just interesting to see a lot of action adventure games made by Japanese studios here. But of course, let's give out the winner. So, the award for the best action adventure game of 2025 goes to Ghost of Yotei. Snubbed! This game was absolutely snubbed. 100, 1,000, 1,000,000% snubbed. This game's good. I don't know why people have been ignoring it. Well, I know why. It's because grifters online poisoned like humanity's mind. But no, this game's awesome. I mean, first of all, there's a lot more variety in this game compared to Ghost of Tsushima. Because, yes, I will admit, as much as I really like Ghost of Tsushima, a lot of the environments tend to kind of look very samey. I mean, you're on an island in that game, and you know, you're kind of going through either a lot of like grassy fields or like bamboo forests. It's or like just regular like bonsai forests. It's kind of the only environments you go through in Tsushima. With Yotei, there's a bit more variety. There's different types of forests in this, and you go into like more snowy areas. So there is a bit more variety in the locales themselves, which I think is much needed. And even just kind of beyond that, they make it a lot more easy to traverse because of the fast travel that they heavily improved upon. Because Tsushima's fast travel was weird, but there's a lot more streamline in here. And I already mentioned this. This game is absolutely beautiful looking. I mean, that goes without saying for a lot of games nowadays, but especially this game. Especially for a game that's running on hardware that's kind of starting to get old now. Like, let me remind you, the PlayStation 5 is already 5 years old, which is crazy to think about. So, granted, I don't necessarily know when the next console generation is going to come out. Maybe 2020, maybe 2027, 2028. I don't know. But what I do know is, even if we're in the latter half of the console generation, this is a game that definitely should be a game that you should try to get on PS5. I'm pretty sure it is on PC, but PS5 is where it's at. So, and again, I just find the whole, like, also the reason why I do respect this game is because it's not trying to be Tsushima. Like, people, like, narrative-wise and, like, locale-wise, it's not supposed to be the same game. And since it takes place right after the Sengoku period, which was like that massive civil war period that happened in Japan. And the original game took place during when the Mongols were trying to figure out a way to invade Japan, which failed massively, but that's the point. It's a different time period, and it's a different, story because of it. There's some motifs that are carried over from Tsushima that are carried over here, but it's not supposed to be the same game. So, and I think I respect it for that. So you should try to always innovate, not try to duplicate. So, and that's why this is my choice. So, all right, platformers. Actually, before we do that, let me get a drink because my throat's already hurting. So, platformers. This is a category that I brought back because platformers have been been on the incline again, and I think it just makes sense to have it as a category. So, and well, 2025 had a lot of platformers to choose from. So, some of which we already talked about on this episode. Because look, Hollow Knight Silksong I'm gonna count it as a platformer. So, because it's a Metroidvania, and Metroidvanias tend to be platformers anyways. Now, that said, I know Split Fiction, you could argue, could also have been nominated for this category as well, but I decided to just kind of give it a general action-adventure. Especially since I want to start highlighting some of these other games. So, first of all, Ninja Gaiden Ragebound. So, Ninja Gaiden didn't just get a mainline sequel return, it got a 2D platformer revival spin-off as well, which is crazy. So this is a lot more in the style of the original Ninja Gaiden series, with obviously a lot of modern quality of life improvements. And I think it's absolutely fun to play. So if you like that more like NES, Super Nintendo era of Ninja Gaiden, well, that's the game for you. But that wasn't the only game that came back as far as, NES, Super Nintendo era Ninja games. Although in this case it would actually be Sega Genesis, because we're talking about Shinobi, Art of Vengeance. Yes, Shinobi of all franchises came back in the year of our Lord 2025. But that's not a bad thing, because it's basically just another alternative to Ninja Gaiden. So, except there's actually a few more mechanics that actually take cues from Mark of the Ninja of all games. So, yeah, and it's also more of like a animation style of game as opposed to the pixel art that they kept with Ninja Gaiden. So, yeah, no, I'd say Shinobi Art of Vengeance. Like, you can definitely argue whether or not Ninja Gaiden or Shinobi is the better of the two, but either way, I still wanted to nominate both of them just because of how much respect I have for them. So, but speaking of sequels that we haven't had in a while, Shantae came back with a vengeance this year with Shantae Vance Risky Revolution, which, I mean, you guys know me, I'm a Shantae fan. My cousins actually had the original Game Boy Color game, and obviously I played through, most of the Shantae games on stream up until this point. I've not touched Seven Sirens yet. I do plan on doing that, hopefully at some point. But no, Risky Revolution is pretty cool, especially since, well, if the name sounds familiar, that's because this was originally supposed to release on GBA. Because, again, for those who don't know the story, basically, the original Shantae came out. It was published by Capcom. They were originally going to make a sequel and release it around like 2005, 6-ish, but then Capcom dropped the project, and so way forward, they didn't have a publisher to publish Shantae anymore, and so they ended up having to scrap that, especially since the DS was brand new at the time, and so that's when they had to shift from working on this game and work on Risky's Revenge. So that's the whole story with that. But then, because they saw a lot of success with their collaborations with Limited Run, as well as the success that they had with their subsequent sequels, they brought the game back. And just like with Ninja Gaiden 4, this is another long-awaited sequel that I think was absolutely worth it, and kind of got forgotten about, or even just straight up snubbed, which I think is disrespectful to my girl. So I'm nominating here. I didn't forget my girl got a game. So yeah, which then leads us to the Rogue Prince of Persia. So yeah, Prince of Persia got another game this year. It wasn't just The Lost Crown that came out in 2024. They also came out with a sort of roguelike Metroidvania hybrid game. So, which is an interesting one. So, again, normally I don't like roguelikes, but again, this one features a lot of quality of life improvements, as well as general accessibility options for people like me who don't necessarily care about these types of games, so that they can actually play them without getting pissed off. That, and also this game, I think, actually has a really good art direction behind it. It's a new Prince, so you would think this is based off the 2008 Prince of Persia. It's not. It's a different Prince, but that's fine. But yeah, no, I think this is another fantastic game. It was actually in early access in 2024 as well, but it came out officially in 2025. So, but yeah, no, it's a cool, decent little Metroidvania sort of Prince of Persia game, taking a lot of cues, of course, from the older games, but adding a lot of mechanics from the past 35 years. So I think it's something you can check out. It's probably and this is going to be sad for me to say, probably the last bit of good we're probably going to see from Ubisoft. So if anything with Anno 117 is to prove to us. Last but not least, we got ourselves Donkey Kong Bonanza. This game was on a ton of people's top 10 lists for 2025. And I can see why. It's just a fun unga bunga beat 'em up platformer sort of game that has destruction in it. And that's on the Switch too. Which, I mean, that last part is a bit questionable because the Switch 2 launch was terrible and it's way too expensive still, but the actual game itself, I respect. So this one, I actually had to contact my cousins to play this for, because my friend Saimori, he didn't get Switch 2. Fair enough. But no, this I think is a pretty good game in its own right. And again, another sort of return to form. A lot of return to forms this year. And we're going to keep seeing return to forms throughout this year of the Donkey Kong franchise. So, yes, it's been way too long since there's been a Donkey Kong proper game. Not since 2014. So, although I think that was actually technically more of an expansion rather than a true sequel, but whatever. So, that said though, I think it's going to be pretty obvious, if you guys know me, what the winner of this category is going to be. But that's not to disrespect any of these games, because I can see an argument being made for any of these games to be made. Granted, some more than others, obviously, but that's not to disqualify or discount all these games. Because I think this has been a showcase of just how much platformers have just they came back. But let's not waste any more time. Let's just get this out of the way. The best platformer of 2025. Shantae Advance Risky Revenge. it's my show. I can do whatever I want. But even then, I actually can defend my case with this game. I don't care what people say. Because, yes, it is a safe game. Because this was originally supposed to be on the Game Boy Advance, and hell, they even actually made a port of this game on the GBA. Limited Run did. Yes, it's a safe, but it's still fun. It's still the core game of Shantae that I personally like. Because again, I love Pirate's Curse, and they just took a lot of the aspects that worked best in Pirate's Curse and Have Gene Hero and Seven Sirens, and they applied it to this game. And also, because this was originally supposed to be on GBA, it has that cool sort of old Super Nintendo GBA look that I absolutely loved with games of this type. And so there's already another added extra layer as to why I think this game is cool. And another cool aspect about this game is the level manipulation that you can do, which I don't know how they actually achieve that in the GBA version. But okay, it's kind of hard to like describe. But no, yeah, like you can basically kind of like how Super Paper Mario, you were able to sort of rotate the camera around. You can do that in this game, and keep in mind this was originally meant to be on less powerful hardware. So the fact that you can do you can just kind of rotate the camera, and again, they released this on the GBA as a 20th as a promo back in April. And that the fact that you can do that is insane. So this really does push the limitations of that, and it's even just kind of a cool gimmick. Even just if you're playing it on more modern hardware. Thank God this is also released on more modern hardware like Steam and stuff. I just haven't picked it up on that yet. But as far as everything else, I mean, it has fluid traversal and enhancements of transformations and stuff. Again, it's a lot more snappy. I mean, it's a Shantae game, so it's gonna have those sort of quirky moments that I think are kind of funny. And well, since this takes place actually in between the original Shantae and Risky's Revenge, yes, this is actually, they actually kept that part consistent as well, not just release wise, but even just the fact that this is a sequel, but it's a prequel to Risky's Revenge because it was supposed to come out before Risky's Revenge. I think that's kind of a cool way for them to do that. And this last point, I have to emphasize, this is an example of a game being brought back done right. Because we've unfortunately seen a ton of examples of games that were in development hell, or they came out so long after their original supposed release date that it overstayed its welcome as far as development, and they just ended up being bad. We got another example of that just last year with the game Captain Blood. It's supposed to come out around 2005, but then it became shovelware, and then they delayed the game multiple times. It got canceled in 2008 until around 2018, 2019, 2020, where the project was brought back. And then it took them another 5 years to make, and then it ended up being kind of shit. And, well, that's not the only time we've seen that before. We saw that with Duke Nukem Forever, which is the most infamous example of that. So, my point being is that as far as games being brought back from the dead, or long-awaited, decade-long sequels are concerned, this is actually one that was done justice and was done right. I would put this in the same category as Metroid Dread. So go check it out. Go support this game. It got completely snubbed under the rug from everywhere, and that makes me sad because it really is a game that I think people should check out. So especially if you're into like Metroidvanias, if you like Hollow Knight, you're gonna like Shantae, and I can guarantee you that. So, all right, RPGs. All right, this is our first category where unfortunately it just kind of showcases that this year was kind of not good. So, I mean, we kind of saw that with the indie category, but we're going to really start seeing that with this category right here because I had to seriously stretch myself thin with this one because, oh my god, this year was bad for RPGs. So, because even like the choices that they had for best RPG for 2025 at the actual Game Awards, in hindsight, yeah, no, they were bad choices. It was just a bad year for RPGs. So, oh shit. Okay, there we go. So, let's go over them. It should not surprise anyone. Clair Obscura was nominated, which, I mean, whatever. Also, I forgot to do all of this in release order. Actually, I'm going to do that right now. But yeah, it should not surprise you that Clair Obscura was the game that got nominated for this, or it was a game that got nominated for this category. It was just, again, everywhere at the time. It was the style at the time. But yeah, you probably saw some of the other games on there. And I don't blame people for being kind of iffy about it. So, okay. So, yeah. Clair Obscura, we know that. But we got two, not just one, but two games made by Obsidian this year. We got Avowed and The Outer Worlds 2. I'm just going to get this out of the way right now. I don't care about Outer Worlds. I didn't like the first game. I thought it was kind of stupid. And thus, I don't care about this sequel either. It's just an era that I just do not care for. I'm sorry, or it's just a style I don't care for at all. That sort of, retro future sort of aesthetic. It's not my vibe. So, but as far as Avowed, this one is a bit more disappointing, at least for me, because I remember whenever this got revealed back in 2019, and then it got an official trailer back in 2020, where it looked cool. I thought that this was, because again, I wanted more fantasy RPGs, like more pure high fantasy, and this looked like it was going to deliver, especially since it was made by Obsidian. A lot of people love Fallout New Vegas and Knights of the Old Republic 2, which is the games that they worked on, even like Alpha Protocol nowadays. And so this game I thought was going to be a slam dunk. And then it got delayed. And then it got delayed again. And then delayed. And then uncertain deadlines. And then they had a complete overhaul in the art direction. And it just ended up kind of getting lost in the sauce. And then it came out and, well, it's not a bad game. It's not terrible. It's just disappointing. It's a shell of what it should have been. Because there's not really like a sense of choice in it. You can't just like take out any NPC that you want compared to literally like any other Bethesda game. And like there's no like consequences, if that makes sense. And it doesn't help that, I don't know, the plant look just looks kind of weird. Like this might sound like a weird criticism. There's just too much color for what this is trying to be. That's not like to say that you can't have color in like an RPG. Like, as a matter of fact, I'm just gonna straight up say this right now. Part of the reason why I hate Fallout is because it's way too dingy and brown. I don't like that look. Piss filter is a meme for a reason, but at the same time, this is an example where there's just too much color. So, like, I don't know. It just has a lot of problems. Go watch a bunch of other people online just kind of explain it for your, like, because they can probably explain it a lot better than me, but you get the point. It should have been better. It should have been better. Same thing with Monster Hunter Wilds. It should have been better. It should have been better. And that's not to say that Monster Hunter Wilds is a bad game either, because it's not. Far from it. But it had a shit launch on PC. And that is a straight up fact. So, that, and also I heard from like Monster Hunter Faithful that it's way too easy of a game. I mean, that's not going to necessarily be a complaint for me, because I prefer more easier games, but the reason why this game, unfortunately... Oh, and also the story's crap. I don't know. But that's ultimately, unfortunately, why I can't nominate Monster Hunter Wilds. It just had it had just such a poor launch, like many other games that we've talked about on this very series. I just can't in good faith. So, which basically means that the only choice that I think does work for this list is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And that game's a masterpiece in a lot of ways. You know, it's a continuation of the previous game, which we've talked about before. But just that added continuation of being set in the Holy Roman Empire and being in this, you know, sort of late Middle Ages era adds a lot of immersion, and just the amount of just stuff you can do, like the alchemy and like the jousts and shit. Like, there's just so much you can do. And I mean, you know, I'm a sucker for like ancient and medieval history. You guys should know that already, so I'm gonna very much appreciate that sort of authenticity that's brought to the table here. But no, I think this game is absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, Clay Obscure Expedition 33 ended up snubbing it. Oh, wait. No, don't clap for that. So, again, Huiditis, unfortunately. Well, I don't know. This was just a rough year for RPGs. I don't remember what it was like last year. I'd have to look. Actually, I think I'm gonna look. Yeah, I'm gonna look like right now at what I had nominated, because I still have all the slideshows. But yeah, which year was better? Yeah, I'd argue last year was better. 2024 was a better year. I mean, some of the choices, I don't know. But let's go over why I ended up choosing. Granted, I do actually want to specify, right before I show my nominations, I do actually have one game that's on here that I know people are gonna be automatically no, but I made a promise to myself that I was going to nominate this game no matter how much it was loved or despised online, just purely out of spite, because I'm so fucking sick and tired of dumbasses online making bad faith criticisms of games. It pisses me off. And unfortunately, we kind of already touched upon that earlier this stream. So, hold on, let me get my... There's something in my nose. So, but like, I am so fucking tired of people making bad faith criticisms of game, even if it's a game that deserves it, even if a game deserves shit. This bad faith criticism online, I'm done with. Once I pull up the list, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, you see it on your screens. Out of just pure spite, I'm nominating Assassin's Creed Shadows. I know that is not a popular take. I don't give a fuck. Because, yes, you can argue that the story is lame and that there's not enough depth. But here's the reason why I'm nominating this game. First of all, I think that, just like Ghost of Yotei, which this game was endlessly compared to in Ghost of Tsushima, this game was endlessly compared to. I still think it's a good looking game. And not only that, but also, here's a bit of a hot take. I actually like the idea of having multiple characters that have different stats. Because you play as Yasuke for, like, if you want to have it more of a straightforward, brawler type of character. And then you play as, I forgot her name already, I'm so sorry. Sorry, I just know that's Yasuke because, like, everyone would shut the fuck up about him in particular, and it was really goddamn annoying. Naoe, sorry. Like, yeah, Naoe, if you wanted to play the more stealthy ninja approach, which, of course, since it's an Assassin's Creed game, you're probably going to be more naturally drawn to that anyways. But, like, also, there's a decent amount of, like, immersion that you can have in this game anyways, even just kind of beyond that. There's a lot of decent amount of, like, side activities you can do in here. There is a dynamic weather system where there's even, like, snowing, like, it could, like, snow in certain occasions. So there's some cool stuff in Assassin's Creed Shadows. And, well, this is gonna surprise a lot of people, but yes, I know there's a bunch of people online who are, like, who downvote this game, but, well, it has 78% on Steam from users. It's not a game that was a massive failure. It was a decently successful game. I know those are just, like, raw numbers, but, like, those are user reviews. Like, that's the thing. So it's a game that has a lot of fans. It's just the problem is that so many dumbass grifters online are trying to tell you that this game is, like, woke, which is a word I'm fucking sick and tired of hearing of, by the way. I made a whole rant about this, like, plenty of times before. I'm not gonna fucking go over that shit because it's a bad faith criticism that ends up in just straight up sexism and racism, especially with the whole Yakuza debate. All I'm gonna say is this is a franchise that you literally fight demigods and gods in Origins and Odyssey, and you literally, like, the whole plot of Assassin's Creed is that you're literally trying to find ancient alien artifacts from, like, a dead race and trying to, like, stop it. It's about, like, two different, like, secret societies fighting each other about how to use that technology. It's like, shut the fuck up. If, like, historical accuracy, like, that's not the point of Assassin's Creed. If you want historical accuracy, go play Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. That game's whole point of that is that it's supposed to be more historically accurate. Assassin's Creed, as it's a mainstream franchise, does not fucking matter in that. It's cool if it's historically accurate. I wouldn't complain about that, but that's not gonna fucking happen when you literally already have a franchise that's about, like, two giant, like, organizations that have been fighting each other for thousands of years. It's so fucking stupid. I'm sorry. I've lost my fucking, like, patience with that specific bullshit online. Like, and if you actually call a game, I'm sorry, but if you actually call something woke, you're a fucking idiot. So I'm not gonna fucking, no. So yeah, out of pure spite, I'm having that game nominated. Thankfully, though, I do have two other games on here. Yes, Hades 2 I'm nominating on here since it's a roguelike. Roguelike is an RPG subgenre, sorry. So that's nominating on here. But thankfully, even if you don't want me to count that, I'm counting Hell Is Us and Octopath Traveler 0 on here. Hell Is Us is it's a Souls-like game. It's a bit more sci-fi. It's kind of like The Surge. But I think the universe is a little bit more interesting. So if you like that style, go check it out. it got completely snubbed this year. And I think as far as like Souls like action RPGs, it's kind of a cool sort of distraction. And well, we got Octopath Traveler 0. This was actually a surprise for me because Octopath Traveler 2 came out only a couple of years ago, and they already released this prequel game. Granted, I know that people have problems with it, but it's already a fantastic game. Anyways, Octopath Traveler 1 was already a pretty good game in its own right, and I respect Octopath Traveler 2 enough. So if you like that old school style of JRPG and you don't mind something not really reinventing the wheel, there you go. But yeah, I ranted too much about that whole fucking thing about Yasuke. Let's just get the winner here. It should be pretty obvious what the winner is going to be here. So, the award for the best role-playing game of 2025 goes to, without a shadow of a doubt, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And y'all thought I was going to choose Shadows. Excuse me. So, this is the real answer for this, because, again, because Clair Obscur was caught using AI assets, this is the default winner. This year was just a terrible year for RPGs. I'm sorry. This was just a bad year all around. But thankfully, this game came out on top. It improved like the jankiness of the first game. Because, yes, the first game was good and the combat was, pretty excellent for what it was trying to achieve. I can definitely see a lot of people feeling that it's a bit too clunky. This game fixes that. Also, just the whole narrative, I think, is actually kind of interesting because, you start off. It's funny because Metroidvania, we've been talking about a lot tonight, but it does the Metroidvania thing where you start off as the bodyguard of the king, or not the king, the lord, and during a battle you lose all your shit, and so then you have to basically progress through the entire game trying to get all your stuff because the people, they won't, even if you look like someone, they don't trust that that's you. So you have to just kind of rise up the ranks to try to get back to that bodyguard status and try to get all your gear back. Which I know that's it's a trope, but this is a game that does that trope well. I mean, Symphony and I did it, and I gave a lot of praise to that game, so it's fine if an RPG does that as well. I mean, that game's actually technically an RPG, whatever. So, but yeah, and then obviously I did emphasize the fact that this game really did emphasize the attention to detail and historical accuracy. Again, if y'all are complaining about a game that isn't meant to be historically accurate, just go to the games that actually have that. I know it's a different time period, because that was feudal Japan at the end of the Sengoku period with Assassin's Creed Shadows. And then this game is set in the late Middle Ages, so it's about 300, 400 year difference. And also completely different geographical, but it doesn't matter. This still tries to have that attention to detail. So, and there's also a ton of different side activities you can do on here, in this game. There's alchemy you can do in here, which is pretty insane. So, not actual magic shit, but you get the point. So, I'd recommend you guys check this game out. So, and I'm also fucking tired of people complaining about historical accuracy and games that don't advertise that as a thing. So, yeah. All right, let's calm ourselves down by playing a shooter game. Okay, I'm gonna be honest as well. This year was rough for the shooter category. Again, spoilers. The original winner for this was going to be Battlefield 6, but because of the AI art thing, and because there really weren't that many other shooter games that came out, I had to pick pick up a bunch of scraps for this one. it was rough trying to find enough games for this. And I'm gonna even be honest, this is where that like rule of like me having to stretch, unfortunately, that got to that point. Because no matter what I say with this category, there's gonna be people who are gonna be upset with what I choose. Because unfortunately, all of these games have their own controversies with them, or at least they're not as highly respected as I feel like they should be. So let's just go over it. So there wasn't a shooter category for the Game Awards, so we don't have to talk about that. But only 4 games, just barely enough for this list, were eligible. And even then, their fan bases don't like these games. I can't win. I can't win with these. So, but let's just go over it anyways. So, first of all, we got Sniper Elite Resistance, which actually, I think to the date is already a year old. Like, as of this recording, if I'm not mistaken. When did it come out? Okay, no, it came out a couple like days prior, so it's already a year old. So, this game, Sniper Elite Resistance, it's more of a spin-off than a sequel, because it's set in the same general region as Sniper Elite 5. It's set in Nazi occupied France, as well as like parts of Germany. And a lot of people had a lot of problems with that, but I'd argue this falls more into the Hades 2 camp, where it's a lot more of what I like anyways. Because I will admit this, I'm a Sniper Elite defender. I don't like every single game in the Sniper Elite series, but I think it's a cool, sort of, third-person action shooter thing going on there. I know people call it a tactical shooter. I don't know, that's a bit of a stretch. Same thing with calling it a stealth game. It's a third-person shooter series. But I don't know, I still think it's fun. It's fine. I think it's kind of cool just taking out dudes. There's a lot of customization for the difficulties in this game. I also think that there's some locales that do look absolutely fantastic, including that mission that you go through, as well as the one that's depicted in the cover art where you're in that little like village outside that castle. So yeah, and this is definitely a game that it's a lot more fun with friends. You can play it solo, but you can really tell that Sniper Elite at its core is more so designed to be more of a co-op experience. At least this Sniper Elite is. And so I think that's more than enough to have it as a nomination. And then we got Doom Dark Ages, which, again, a lot of people were like complaining about this. And I don't get it, because this game's still really fucking awesome. So I will definitely agree with this. It feels more like it doesn't directly feel like a Doom game. It's kind of like Doom 3, where it takes a lot of gameplay changes, and also it's set before the events of Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal, so that doesn't that's kind of a thing as well. But and because it's set in like an alternate dimension that's clearly a lot more fantasy based, it ironically feels more like a Quake game than it does a Doom game. And you guys know I fucking love Quake. That's one of my favorite games of all time. So I don't necessarily have a problem with it, although that does make me question, why do we not have our next Quake single player game yet? Just please give us our next single player Quake game. id or Bethesda or whoever the fuck runs these franchises anymore. But that's besides the point. I think that this game is pretty fun. A lot of cool new weapons and mechanics that are brought in. Some cool new enemy designs for both new enemies and pre-existing enemies. It's still a fun time. It's just different. And it is also a little bit of a slower paced game compared to Doom Eternal. So do keep that in mind. But I still think that it's a worth. The game itself is still pretty fun. So, and then we got ourselves Deep Rock Galactic Survivor, which is a spinoff of Deep Rock Galactic. You guys know I like Deep Rock. I think it's a pretty cool game. But this one is a top-down shooter, which we've talked about. Top-down shooters are shooters, so there you go. And yeah, like Deep Rock Survivor, I mean, it's a cool little like throwback to like the top-down shooters of old. It kind of reminds me of like, I know this obviously came out way later after that era, but it kind of reminds me of Black Ops' Dead Ops modes. So if you're into that, Survivor's not a bad game to pick up, even if it's not the type of game I would like to play all the time. You know, again, it's more like that, or even like a OG Helldivers or a Magicka 1 and 2. You know, it's in that category. It's a decent little experience. So, go check it out. And then, of course, we got ourselves another game that heavily disappointed a lot of people, but I don't think a lot of that is necessarily fair. We got Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Now, first of all, yes, this is a shooter game. Primary method of disposing enemies is through a first-person perspective of shooting people with different types of ammo. I don't want to fucking hear from people. I know people just call it an action-adventure game. It is a first-person shooter game. So, I don't want to fucking hear it. That said, I think this one is a cool one. It's definitely better than Metroid Prime 3 and also Other M. So, and I mean, the art style, yeah, it's not as like dingy as the first two Metroid Prime games, which is one of the reasons why, you know, that sub-series of Metroid games is popular. It's because it was a lot more of a serious tone, as well as like a more, not grim, but definitely a lot more of a, I don't know how to describe it. Like it was definitely more of like a secluded tone, which I mean, the old Metroid games were like that. But I don't think that's a bad thing in this game's case. I actually, I kind of like that this I like how this game does try to do some things that are different compared to the original trilogy. Like, and I don't know, there's just some, I don't know, I just had a little bit of fun with this. Again, I barely have experience with this because, again, my cousins had the Nintendo, like the Switch 2, so, and I barely got to play this, but from what I played, I thought it was fine. So, but let's not waste any more time because we know what the winner is going to be on this one. Because, again, this is how you know this year's bad. Alright. Best Shooter Game Award for 2025. Doom Eternal. Oh, Doom Dark Ages. God damn it. I mean, whatever. Dark Ages, this ended up being the shoehorn option. If it wasn't going to be Battlefield 6, it was going to be this. So, again, the reason why I ended up cheating this, I mean, first of all, there's a lot of like mechanics that weren't in previous Doom games that they decided to add in this. For example, a parry system where you have your shield, which you have at all times, as you probably have seen on the cover right there, as well as a ton of gameplay, where enemies shoot out like they do the whole the Cuphead method, as I'm just gonna call it. I know it existed beforehand, but it got popular with Cuphead, where you see a bunch of like enemies shooting at you, and well, you have to dodge most of the stuff that's being shot at you. But then there's always that one thing where you can parry, and either like you get a buff from it or you just kind of deflect it. In this case, you deflect that shot, which adds a lot of, I would say that adds some skill to the movement in whenever you're playing the game. So I think that's a fine mechanic that they brought in. Also, the vehicle combat, um, specifically when you're flying the dragon and when you're in the mech, I think those are fine sections. I know people complain about them, but you know, Doom needed, like, I feel like at this point you needed to have some innovation within Doom, because there's so much that you can do with like the core frame of Doom to where you kind of have to start innovating. And I think those are some innovations that, even if they weren't necessarily the most popular changes, I still respect. So, also, this game, again, it feels a lot more like a Quake game simply because of its atmosphere and its aesthetics. It's a lot more in tone with Quake 1, with that sort of grungy, grimy, gothic tone, which is a tone that I absolutely love, but I can understand why it confused a lot of people. And again, it just makes me question, why have they just not made Quake 5 or whatever. So, but I digress. Either way, though, just like with Cyber League Resistance, this game also has a ton of like accessibility options. So if you want to make your game a lot harder or a lot easier, there's a lot of like little tweaks you can do. And of course, being a Doom game, it's gonna have its chunky combat, and as in like you're gonna rip and tear a lot of demons in here, even if the melee options aren't really the greatest, and you're not as focused on the takedowns compared to the previous Doom games. You're still gonna have a lot of fun down here. So this game, I think this game is good. So I know there's some people who have already said that this game is disappointing. I don't agree with that. So, is it as good as Doom Eternal or Doom 2016? Okay, is it as good as Doom Eternal? No. Is it as good as Doom 2016? You can argue on that one. Alright, Sim Strategy. Another category that suffered big time this year. Oh my god. And this one actually stings even more because this, unfortunately, I gotta admit it, this is kind of a dying genre. And this is something I remember actually hearing about. It was either like last year or the year before, but I remember hearing about articles saying that, um, you know, because of the decrease in attention spans, um, that strategy games just aren't appealing to a lot of people anymore, or at least people that are either like around my age or younger. And that makes me sad because some of my favorite games of all time are simulation and strategy games. I mean, hello. Last stream I played was City Skylines. So, yeah. Oh my god, my nose. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's wrong with my nose right now. Am I just getting sick while I'm streaming? Goddamn. That's annoying. Sorry. Anyways. But yeah, no, this just disappoints me. Because, again, I love strategy games and I love simulation games. And it hurts my soul knowing that there's a lot of gamers that just don't really care. Like, actually, let me see if I can find that article. Why aren't strategy games popular? Yeah, it was like a 2020, it's a 2025 article. Yeah, like basically it's like game like a lot of video like a lot of gamers nowadays, they don't really care for a lot of games that have like strategic planning or like game like a lot of like tactics in them. Um and there's a lot more interest in a lot more like casual, okay, a lot more like faster paced games. So which I guess explains the whole rise of MOBA games, but you guys know me, I hate MOBAs, so but whatever, we're not here to have that conversation. What about the games that were nominated for the Game Awards? Well, I mean, okay, we're not gonna waste our breath on the altars. That game got caught using AI assets. We're not even gonna do it. But let's talk about Civ 7. Probably one of the biggest disappointments of 2025. I was really excited about Civ 7, especially since, Civilization as a franchise doesn't have a bad game. Like Civ 1, Civ 2, Civ 3, yeah, they're old, but they were hella innovative for their time. And well, Civ 4 brought us the best Civilization theme ever, and also brought us the more cartoony aesthetic that the series pretty much adopted since. And then Civs 5 and 6 are legendary games. Like they're highly regarded as basically being some of the best games of all time. And hell, even Civilization Beyond Earth is like kind of a cool spin-off. And Revolution even has some of its fans. But Civ 7 dropped the ball hard simply because of two things. Terrible UI, which is basically a death sentence for a lot of strategy games. And the way that they changed progression in the game. Because they split the game into 3 distinct eras, and the problem is that once you get to the next era, you cannot keep the same civilization that you had. You have to change to a different civilization. Which is the dumbest mechanic when your game is called Civilization. It's so bad. I don't know why they forced that change on you. It's so dumb. Because it's like, the whole point is for you to, like, stay in whatever civilization you want and, like, see how that civilization evolves in itself in that time. So that them just gutting that, it's so dumb. It's so dumb. So there's a bunch of other problems with Civ 7, but those are like the main two. There's also the fact that like the AI is not as competent as it was, and a bunch of other problems. But unfortunately, Civ 7 was a massive, massive, massive disappointment. And yeah, by default, it is the worst Civ game by a mile. It's not even close. I'd rather play any other game, including Civs 1 and Civ 2. So, yeah, unfortunately, because it ended up being like kind of a bad game, I can't nominate it. So, also, I can't nominate Final Fantasy Tactics because the thing is that while yes, it is a game that is highly respected, it is a remake of a game from 1997, so it does not qualify for this category. So, also, you guys know me, I don't really care for Jurassic World. I like Jurassic Park 1, but like that's kind of the only thing for Jurassic Park that I care for. Oh, and also the theme park in Florida, but like that's about it. I don't know. And also, like, I'm not even against like zoo tycoon kind of games. As a matter of fact, was playing Planet Zoo like just not too long ago, which is made by the same developers, actually, funny enough. But if I wanted to play a game like that, I honestly would rather this just have been an expansion for that rather than just its own series of games, because it's the third game. So I don't know. That's just me though. Thankfully, though, the last two games I definitely do think are worth it being on this, nomination here. We got Tempest Rising and 2 Point Museum. So Tempest Rising, if you couldn't tell, is basically Command and Conquer 15 years later, made by a different studio. It is a spiritual successor, which a lot of spiritual successors tend to get snubbed, which fair enough, because it's like, it's not as good as the original. I'd argue this is one of those cases where it is as good as the original. So, it has that same sort of motif, and because it's a real-time strategy game that just straight up does what a bunch of other RTS games back in the day did. In this game's case, specifically Command and Conquer 3, Tiberian Wars. I think it is very, very, very enjoyable in that regard. Again, I love my RTS games, Command and Conquer being one of those franchises. And I'm pretty sure this was made by a lot of ex Command and Conquer developers, if I'm not mistaken, or at least a lot of people they were able to talk to a lot of people who did work on the old CNC games. And yeah, no, this game I think succeeds in a lot of ways in that regard. And thankfully, 2 Point Museum is also a very good follow-up. It's, the third game in the 2 Point series. So there was 2 Point Hospital, 2 Point Campus, 2 Point Museum. This is the third game. And yeah, there's actually not that many business simulators that are like museum based. So like we've seen, 2 Point Hospital, it's based off of Theme Hospital. And, there's a bunch of games that are like simulators that are like medical based, right? We've seen that, a dime a dozen. And then 2 Point Campus is not the only school simulator that like I can think of. I mean, hell, you can even argue Persona is kind of that. So it's not the most uncommon thing. But a museum? That's unique. And again, I'm huge into like history and stuff. And hell, last weekend I was actually just at a museum here locally. It was like a natural history museum, which I think was actually pretty cool. And I into history and I'm into like science and stuff, and so this is definitely very much in my alley. And no, I think the game itself was actually pretty good. Definitely, I know a lot of people had problems with 2 Point Campus, but 2 Point Museum definitely a step above in a lot of ways. Unfortunately, the winner was not either of these last two games. It was Final Fantasy Tactics, the Valis Chronicles.
What a shame.
So again, it's not a bad game, but it's a remake. We shouldn't be rewarding remake games, at least in my opinion. And unfortunately, I'll be honest, this year was very, very, very stretched thin. And this is kind of where the asterisk that I did mention at the very beginning, that's where this is going to apply. So, but let's not talk about that. Let's first talk about these other games here, which I had to do some deep digging for these, because no one was talking about any of these. So first of all, we've got ourselves Foundation. This game was in early access for a long time, as far back as 2018, or that's when the open beta came out, and then that's when the alpha came out, and then the beta, it came out in early access in 2019. So this is a game that was long in the making. So, but it finally had a full release just on the mark of when this stream is happening exactly 1 year ago. And it's a medieval city builder simulator. So it's a city builder. I like city builders. Again, City Skylines, last stream I did. This one is set in the Middle Ages. So, you know, kind of an Anno / Grand Ages medieval, if anyone even knows what that is. That's the vibe that this game's going for. And I think that's pretty cool in its own right. And again, I'm always up for games that are city builders to pop up every once in a while. I think it's just an underrated genre as a whole. I mean, again, Airborne Kingdom was a game that we nominated for 2020 that got no attention, but I think is absolutely fantastic as far as city builders are concerned. So, and it has like a cool, unique gimmick to it. And yeah, no, Foundation is just another sort of long line lineage of that type of game. So, and then we got Cataclysmo, which is a more tower defense style of strategy game, and which is weird because I don't ever nominate tower defense games. Like, you know, it's another medieval style of tower defense, as you can tell. Probably a bit more fantasy leaning, but yeah, like it's alright. I'm not gonna pretend it's like, you know, a fantastic game that reinvents the wheel. It's fine. As far as a fantasy tower defense game where you like unlock a bunch of new units and stuff. If you've ever played any sort of game like a Bloons tower defense or anything like that, you'll know exactly what this type of game is. So, but let's talk about the asterisk, because this is the one where it's like it wasn't caught using, you know, AI art, because it came out not using AI art, but it was confirmed that they did use AI tools creating it. And that's Europa Universalis 5. So, of course, the long-awaited sequel to Europa Universalis 4, which, of course, is a Paradox game. Everyone loves their Paradox games. City Skylines is a Paradox game, but whatever. Well, Paradox published. But, and you know, if you've played any other strategy game by Paradox, you'll feel right at home with this. So if you've played any of the Victoria games, any of the previous EU games, Hearts of Iron, Crusader Kings, you'll know exactly what this type of game is. So, and you know, we've even nominated EU games before on our Caspian Game Awards. It's just this one I'm very, 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 very hesitant to even have as a nomination because, like I said, it was confirmed that they did use AI tools to help them in the process of this. But then there's been a lot of just weird controversies involving the artwork in the game as well. It hasn't been fully confirmed that it was AI art. And I did look at a bunch of the different pieces in the game. It does look genuine, but it's very off. As if it wasn't AI art, that it was like drawn, like they use a lot of AI art for references. And that's kind of where it gets iffy for me. So if I have to end up doing a Redux stream and it turns out that this game did get confirmed to use AI art in the final post-launch game, or even just post-launch support, then like this is the most likely candidate that's going to be removed, if you catch my drift. So, but as someone who does like these types of games, they're not my favorite, but I do respect these types of grand strategy games. I'm still willing to give it a bit of respect, but that's a massive, massive asterisk. So at least I caught myself on this one this time. I unfortunately didn't do that in our last Caspian Game Awards, where unfortunately some games did get caught and got swept under, like they fell through the cracks. So, but alas, let's get out the award. So, the award for the best sim strategy game of 2025 goes to 2 Point Museum. Hell yeah! 2 Point Museum wins. So, and I think it's absolutely worth it. So, again, a very unique type of business management sim, because there's not really that many games that have this specific theme. But 2 Point has proven to be an absolute banger of a series. It's not even a decade old, and the fact that it has already had this much staying power, I think is a testament to the developers of these games. So, and also, I mean, since the museum, you have a lot of like freedom and control of like how you set up your like both the displays as well as the different rooms that have, you know, all your artifacts put inside. So there's a lot of like, it's not as rigid as something like a 2 Point campus or a 2 Point hospital. There's a lot more freedom of choice, which makes it very accessible for newcomers of the series. Which, of course, that sort of quirky British humor that the series has become known for, it's back in full force. And, you know, being a business management simulator, there's tons of replay value in this. I mean, there's already tons of replay value for the previous 2 Point games, so it should not surprise you. It is the same with this. So, I approve. Alright, best multiplayer games. Alright, so this was a category in the Game Awards 2025, and this is a category that has a well-known history of failing as far as, at least for what I personally like as far as multiplayer games. I'm kind of at that point where I'm not really a big fan of playing multiplayer games anymore, or at least like PvP multiplayer games. I'm just kind of sick of playing that type of game nowadays. But even just kind of with that, I'll be honest, a lot of Game Awards in the past have failed hard as far as getting a good lineup of games. And well, I'm just gonna spoil this for you guys. This year was no exception. Although, to be fair, I don't blame them this time, because this was kind of a crappy year. So, yeah. We already talked about it. Battlefield 6 and Arc Raiders, I just cannot, unfortunately, in good faith, nominate them anymore. If I could, Battlefield 6 would have been the winner. Like, a slam dunk. But because of the controversies, I can't. So, Split Fiction's fine, but then we've got ourselves these other games. So first of all, Elden Ring Night Rain. Yes, Elden Ring got a spin-off game, a multiplayer spin-off game that just kind of came and went. It was a extraction. Yeah, like that's the thing. It was a battle royale extraction hybrid hack and slash that was a Soulsborne game, which that's already kind of a weird concept to begin with, because it's like those are two completely different audiences. Yeah, extraction shooter and battle royale fans, I don't see them as being the same type of people who would be into Souls games. They just it's two completely different worlds. Like, I'm sorry, but like that sort of attempt to mix both of those audiences, it just didn't work. And it kind of shows, because again, this game ended up just kind of ended up getting forgotten. So I think that just kind of shows. Granted, it probably has its audience. That's not to take anything from that, but yeah, no, this is a miss by FromSoft. I'm sorry, but it is. So yeah. And then we got Peak, which, I mean, if you guys know me, it should not surprise you that, like, this is just not my type of game. I know my friend Saimori and their friends, they love these types of games. It's just not really my vibe. Like, granted, I'm not one of those people who calls it, like, friend slop, because, yes, that's become a term, to describe not just games like Peak, but also games like Content Warning and Repo and stuff like that. Which, yes, I don't like those games either, but I'm not gonna like talk trash about those types of games, especially since, well, like I said, my friends play those games a lot, so it's just not my thing. So most of it is just because of its art direction. I don't like that art style. I'm sorry. So, yeah. That said, though, Arc Raiders ended up being the winner, which, well, in hindsight, probably. I mean, I know Arc Raiders is popular, but I don't want to promote AI generated content, people. I'm sorry. I just don't. You know? So, for me, this would be the Hoodie-itis pick. But thankfully, we've already talked about most of these games that I have nominated for this, so I'm not going to waste my breath too much. Sniper Elite Resistance, it's a much more of a co-op game. Split Fiction is a co-op game, period. So, Tempest Rising is just a cool RTS multiplayer action. So, if you like that type of stuff, there you go. And then, yeah, Deep Rock Survivor, being just the top-down version of a Deep Rock Galactic. But I'm gonna throw one more bone, actually, at another game. And it's usually a genre I don't particularly care about, like, at all. But because it's much more of, like, my thing, I'm actually gonna give some props. Lego Party. Yes, a party game. I never nominate party games, like, ever. It's kind of something that, like, I think I've just been known to, like, rarely ever nominate either rhythm games or party games on here. Hell, I'm not even consistent with sports racing and fighting. So, but Lego Party? I mean, you know me, I like my Lego stuff, and I mean, granted, I'm a little bit disappointed with how they're handling freaking Lego Star Wars right now, but that's a whole other conversation for another day. But if I want to play a game that is more of a party game, it's got to be at least an aesthetic that I like, and since I will admit I do like Legos, this one fits. Actually, it's funny because I'm actually kind of looking at the cover here. I have that spaceship that's underneath the party. Yeah, that came out during that 2024 space wave of Lego City. So which I'm all down for. So, and they probably just have a bunch of other modern Lego pieces in there. So, I don't know. I just wanted to give it a bone. All right. So, fuck. Okay, yeah, I need to make sure we go faster because I think I might be sick. God. Thank God it's the weekend. Alright. So, the award for the best multiplayer game of 2025 goes to Tempest Rising. So, yeah, Tempest Rising is going to be our winner here. Though more so because it's just a good RTS game. It's the type of RTS we needed for such a long time, because real-time strategy games kind of died around like 2010, 2011. Like I feel like the last like truly great RTS game that came out was StarCraft 2. Some people would actually no. Company Heroes 2. That was the last great RTS game, 2013. After that, yeah, nothing. And that sucks, because this is a genre that I really like. You know, one of my favorite games of all time is Dawn of War, which may or may not be relevant in a second. But I love Dawn of War. I love Company Heroes, Command and Conquer, Halo Wars, Battle of the Middle Earth, Age of Empires. It's got its fans. It's not my favorite, but I respect it enough. Same thing with Warcraft. So it's a genre of game that I really love, and that I kind of wish was a lot more popular than MOBAs. That said, though, this is a game that, again, it doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. It's just a solid game. You know, it's a spiritual successor to Command and Conquer, which is a series that needed a game a long time. Like, it needed a sequel a long time ago, but never came out because of that fucking Tiberian Twilight game. So, like, yes, that is a franchise killer right there. So, and like EA's just been stuck making like mobile games for Command and Conquer, which is not what it should be. It should be full-fledged games. So, but I digress. It's a game that I think the market really needed nowadays. And thankfully there's tons of gameplay depth in this. Why? Because this is one of the most balanced games as far as RTS games. Since it's a newer one, you know, there's always constant tweaks and updates and patches to try to make sure that there's not something that's like absolutely overpowered. Because, well, let's be real here, a lot of RTS games are guilty of having a faction having overpowered shit. Thankfully, since this is a game released in the modern gaming era, things can be like patched out, buffed, nerfed, all that fun stuff. Usually that's something that I don't like having as an argument, but even then, it's just a solid game. It's just a solid game all around. Whether you're playing it in its, you know, skirmish mode, or you're playing PvP, or you're playing its campaign modes. So, yeah. And as with any RTS game, you got to bring your A game when it comes to music and sound design, and thankfully this game is top notch. So, go check it out, because even if you don't play the game, at least listen to the soundtrack. It's worth it. All right. Best DLC and expansion. So, this used to be a category in the original Spike Game Awards, but because of Spike Game Awards, they messed that up. But I feel like that was one of the few things that was a good idea that they didn't translate to the modern Game Awards. They just did not have a DLC expansion category. Which sucks, because I like giving recognition for post-launch content. So, what type of post-launch content are we talking about here? For this year, anyways. Well, first of all, again, we have already talked about this. It's got to be a game that came out before the year, but the expansion came out, you know, or DLC, whatever. And thankfully, there's actually a decent amount. So first of all, we got Lies of P Overture. So Lies of P came out in 2023. You know, it's another Soulsborne style of game. If you guys don't know what it is, it's like a dark fantasy one. And yeah, no, this one was, you know, people kind of see it as like it's kind of like Shadow of the Erd Tree in a lot of ways. And because of that, a lot of people fucking love this one. I can definitely see why. It has a ton of content, tons of new areas. It serves more as like a proper continuation rather than just kind of like a side-off story, which I think is pretty much what expansion should be. But no, I think that this, if you like that style of game, which I mean, Lies of P is a beautiful looking game in its own right, and it has pretty good combat to boot. Go check it out. And then of course we got ourselves Helldivers 2: Heart of Democracy. So this is an update for Helldivers 2 where the Illuminate invade Earth, and this also added in like new Illuminate enemies as well as the new cities. So you're not just fighting on a bunch of outskirts areas anymore. You actually have the ability to go into major cities, and like I said, since this involves an invasion of Earth, you got to fight in the mega cities that are on Earth. I actually think I think I streamed this last year, at least once or twice, and I had a lot of fun. And thankfully, by this point, they did nerf a lot of the problems I had with the Illuminate, and so they're they did make them a lot easier to fight, even with the new enemies that came around, which were a bitch to take down. But obviously, with the right team and the right tools at the job, you'll be able to take them down. And you're gonna like this game, or you're gonna like this DLC, especially since that's kind of one of the big focuses for this DLC, was focusing on those puzzles. And so yeah, no, like I think it's I don't know, I just think it's worth it. Sorry, I don't really have anything else to say. So yeah. And then we got ourselves Still Wakes the Deep, Siren's Rest. Of course, this is the horror game that was set on the oil rig that was kind of cool, made by the Chinese Room. So in this one, you actually go more into the underwater portions of that game. So you're kind of doing like a bit of a Soma thing here. And so if you like that sort of aspect of survival horror, you're really gonna like Siren's Rest. Especially, like I said, with that sort of like Soma-like feel. I mean, it makes sense since the frictional games did work on Soma, and Chinese Room worked on one of the Amnesia games. So probably taking a lot of cues from each other in that regard. So yeah. And then we've got ourselves Sea of Stars: Throes of the Watchmaker. So Sea of Stars was a RPG that came out a couple years ago. We actually featured it in our 2023 Caspian Game Awards. And I thought it was an okay sort of like RPG. And yeah, this expansion pretty much is a new storyline that is very circus themed, which normally that'd be a turnoff for me, but Sea of Stars is already a pretty good game in its own right, so I can get past that. And so there's a lot of like circus themed enemies and sort of like old late 19th, early like 20th century, like 1900s decade sort of aesthetics that they go through, which does kind of add a bit of a unique flair to this type of RPG. So if that's kind of your vibe, you can definitely check this out. All right, so the award for the best DLC / expansion of 2025 goes to Indiana Jones and the Order of Giants. So, I mean, again, I don't really have much to say about this other than it's just mostly the vibes. So, like, obviously, Troy Baker does return to play Indy in this, which is always a plus. If you have like an A-list voice actor for anything, it's always good to have them brought back for your subsequent either sequels or expansions. But more importantly, this game, like this DLC, is actually pretty lengthy for it. Like you can easily go through this for like 4 to 6 hours. It's not a short it's not a short expansion at all. And yeah, I dare to call it an expansion, not just a DLC. So yeah, like you can beat it. Like it takes a decent while to go through this. It's not like something that you just go through like very quick. And that's helped by the fact that there's a lot more intricate puzzles in here, a lot more challenging puzzles. So you're not just going to be doing the whole Uncharted thing where you've got like your little like notebook and it just gives you the answer. No, you got to think with this one. You know, you got to play this like any other puzzle game. You have to play like Blueprints or Myst. So I think that's something that, because that's what this is more leaning towards, I think adds to that, since that wasn't the main focus of Great Circle. Great Circle was like was definitely like the story and its combat. But even then, this game has some beautiful looking areas in it. I mean, obviously this is just an artwork of this, but this should just give you a sense of the type of stuff that's in this, like in this expansion. So I recommend you guys play for yourselves. So, all right, remakes slash remasters. Again, this is a category that where we do give props and recognition to some of the biggest of remakes and remasters. Granted, I am kind of getting tired of just there being a ton of remakes or remasters for video games, even just like movies and like TV shows. It's just, hell, even music is starting to have a bunch of remakes and like remasterings of tracks. It's kind of getting annoying. So yeah, because a lot of the band, like a lot of like emo bands, I've kind of realized they're just redoing, like some new metal bands, they're just redoing a lot of older tracks. It's like, oh god. But that's a whole other discussion. As far as video games are concerned, there's just been a lot of just remasters the past, well, last year, but there was one major remake. But we'll talk about that. So first of all, Elder Scrolls Oblivion. This was a drop that came out of literally nowhere. So yeah, an entire remaster of Oblivion dropped last year. It was announced like at the very tail end of March, and then like came out a week later in April. It was a well kept secret, and a well kept secret it deserved to be. Well, okay, let me phrase that in a good way. It was a well kept secret that was deserved because, goddamn, is this a beautiful and amazing remaster. I mean, Oblivion, I do think, is probably the best Elder Scrolls game out there. I know there's some people who would argue one of like Morrowind is better, or like Skyrim's better. I'm personally more of an Oblivion guy. And so for there to be this good of a remaster, I think is actually pretty cool. Even if some of the art direction was lost in translation, which I think is a bit of a shame. And also, admittedly, the price is just a little bit too steep for what it gives you. I mean, yes, it gives you all the DLC in it, including that horse armor. Don't worry, you don't have to pay extra for fucking horse armor. But also just the fact that, it's not really mod compatible. It does kind of bring it down, unfortunately. So because of that, I do respect it though still. So I would still recommend you guys check it out. But yeah, also System Shock 2 got a 25th anniversary remaster, even though it's the 26th anniversary, but I digress. System Shock 2, of course, being pretty legendary game that is kind of an RPG, kind of survival horror hybrid sort of thing. It's kind of complicated, but it did birth the concept of the immersive sim, and so you can thank this for spawning games like BioShock and Prey 2017, as well as like Deus Ex in a adjacent capacity. So having a full remaster of the game is pretty cool. I actually did recently play through a little bit of the original version that they had on Steam. And it still plays okay nowadays. I don't know, System Shock, it wasn't ever my favorite thing. It's just a series that I do respect. And having a full-fledged remaster, I think is pretty cool. Even if a part of me kind of wishes they just would have remade it like they remade the first game. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, next up we got ourselves Heretic Hexen, which is just, Heretic from 1994 and Hexen just kind of given the Doom plus Doom 2 treatment. So yeah. So yeah, if you liked what they did a couple years ago with Doom plus Doom 2, that's what they essentially did with Heretic and Hexen, which is a good thing because admittedly, yeah, they just kind of, like, Microsoft just kind of, or Bethesda, whoever owned like these games, they kind of did nothing with Heretic and Hexen for the longest time. So for those games to get a proper remaster, I think it's pretty cool. Just please remaster Hexen 2, because oh my god, it's so fucking hard trying to find a decent port of that game. It's so annoying. So yeah. Alright, let's also go over the other exciting games. So I mentioned Dawn of War. There's a reason for that, because it got a full-fledged remaster last year, which is exciting for me because, I mean, the original version that's on Steam is still fine to play with, and hell, I actually do own a physical copy of the Gold Edition along with the expansion packs. But this is a nice refresh of the game. So a ton of quality of life improvements that were added here. And, well, unlike Oblivion, it's actually mod friendly. So granted, you still had to download all the mods through like ModDB, but that's fine. I'd rather there be, that than nothing. So yeah, and I think that this game, it's a good glow up for this game. So if that's anything to take from this. Which, speaking of glow ups, Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater came out, which should not surprise you guys that this thing was absolutely legendary. Well, Metal Gear Solid 3 is an absolutely legendary game, so having a full-fledged remake of this, I think, was a massive win. I remember when I saw this for the whatever trailer it was one of the Sony showcases. It wasn't E3, I know that. Was it 2022 or 2023? I don't remember. But the moment they announced that, I was excited. And thankfully, absolutely worth it. This game's beautiful and a faithful recreation of the original game, with some things that are kind of changed around a little bit, but those are super minor. I think this is absolutely fantastic remake. And of course, we already talked about Val's Chronicles. It's a good game, just it's a good remake of a Final Fantasy game. And I do respect it enough to still have it in this category. Actually, did we even nominate this for 1997's Caspian Game Awards? This is how you know, this is how you know it's been forever ago. Okay, Sim Strategy. Oh no, I didn't, but I had it as an honorable mention. Well, it's finally getting recognition on here. So, but no, it's a solid game. It just 1997 was just a stacked year for strategy games, so I just did not have a placement for that. Although maybe looking at this, I might change things around, but you get the point. It's a good game, and it's a good glow up of a game that was stuck on old hardware for the longest time. So go check it out. But it should be pretty obvious by how I've been talking what the winner for this is going to be. So
The award for the best remake slash remaster of 2025, without a shadow of a doubt, is, of course, Metal Gear Solid Delta. I don't think I really need to say much else about this, because a ton of people have already explained why this is a good remake. I mean, it's a visual and immersive upgrade as far as not just the look, but even just a lot of the stuff that they've done in the game. The controls, like, there's still some of the old control stuff that they have, but it's a lot more, modern user friendly on here, so you don't have to like do that weird thing that you had to do in Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, where you had like, if you wanted to like aim properly, that you had to hold down the square button in a very specific way. Like, again, I like Metal Gear Solid 2, but that was such an awkward thing I had to do. Like, I know that's like a nitpick, I know, but like, none of the weird, quirky bullshit controls. So it's a lot more streamlined. Also, again, this is a very faithful recreation of just the story of Metal Gear Solid 3. There's not really much to really like complain about the changes that they made. If any, I don't think they made too many changes in the narrative of this. So, and I mean, either way, it's pretty faithful to the original game. And, well, it's a good way to start the franchise because, well, chronologically speaking, this is the first game. Metal Gear Solid 3 is the earliest game in the timeline. So if you wanted a good game that's, like, if you wanted to start anywhere, this might actually be the best way to start it. I mean, they do have the original game in the Master Collection that they released a couple years ago, and obviously I do own the game on PS3 through the Legacy Collection that had all the games up until Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker. But this is still a fantastic, like, beginning game, and I recommend it, even if it's like the first. Actually, it's technically the second game that doesn't have Kojima's influence, so take that for what you will. Alright, art direction. So, this is the visual style and aesthetics of a game. I like giving this category because video games can be art, and we've seen plenty of games where that is definitely the case. And this was a category at the Caspian game, or not, at the original. This was a category at the Game Awards, but I feel like this was just kind of like, this is always one that it's kind of hit or miss. I feel like this year was also a miss because Hades 2 and Hollow Knight Silk Song, those absolutely explain it. Like, those pretty much are a given as far as their art direction. I mean, Hades 2, I mean, those are both absolutely beautiful looking games, so I don't blame them for choosing those. I mean, Hades 2 with that sort of cel-shaded, almost anime look, but not anime, I think it's cool. And then Hollow Knight Silk Song, of course, with, that sort of continuation of the original Hollow Knight sort of moody colors, but with a lot more brighter colors to kind of add to that flair. Death Stranding 2 and Ghost of Yotei, as much as I do respect them, and I do think that Ghost of Yotei is a beautiful looking game, I don't know those are the best for art direction. Because again, when I think of art direction, I think of like the art style, and when you have a game that has more realistic looking graphics, that's kind of when you go away from like the art direction side of things. I don't know, it's kind of awkward. I understand it for Clair Obscura Expedition 33. Problem is that, like I said, they got caught using AI art assets, and so because of that, that should automatically null it from the list, because what else did they use with AI? And well, unfortunately, the Game Awards doesn't agree with me because this ended up getting the award. So, Hoodie-itis, yet again, from Claire Obscure Expedition 33, because they fucking swept this. So, let's improve this list. So, yeah, I'm gonna nominate Midnight Walk for its absolutely unique looking claymation animation style that they made with this game. Trust me, is absolutely a unique and beautiful looking game in its own right. So I'm highlighting this game as much as I am because of just how much it looks. So if you want, like, this is definitely the definition of a game that deserves a nomination for art direction. So go look at screenshots and gameplay of this. It is absolutely like a beautiful looking game. I'm also gonna nominate The Rogue Prince of Persia for this because I think that this game has like a cool, almost comic book look to it. Which what you see on the cover, it looks like that in the game. You know, it has that sort of comic book look to it, and I think it absolutely looks beautiful. So, if there's anything to take away, is that I think that looks cool. So, and then we've got ourselves actually another new unique game, which I think this is the only category this is being nominated for in this. We've got Sword of the Sea, which I don't remember if this is made. I don't think it's made by the same people who made. Okay, no, it's made by the same people who made Abzu and The Pathless. So they basically made art games. So of course it's going to be on here. It has a very similar desert aesthetic to Journey. So if you like Journey, Sword of the Sea is definitely a good pick for you. So yeah, that very sort of deserty mixed with like a bit of an ocean vibe. So yeah, it's a cool look. But let's choose the winners. So yeah, this is how you know I'm like kind of okay. We're starting to get to the end of this. So I've explained a lot of these games a lot. It should be obvious as to why I'm choosing these. But anyways, the award for the best art direction of 2025 goes to Hades 2. So Hades 2. I think this game still looks beautiful. I mean, it has a similar aesthetic to the first game. It's a very gloomy, fantastical style that obviously, you know, has a very deathly look to it, which yes, does look very similar to that of the first game. However, the reason why this game is like it just elevates beyond what Hades 1 does is that its color palette, because the original Hades for most of its areas relied a lot on bright colors, specifically like reds and oranges. And this game here, it relies a lot more on greens and blues. And I think that color change alone makes it as memorable as the original. It makes it very distinct. Yeah, gameplay wise, it's really not that different, but it makes it its own thing just on visuals alone. And I think that use absolutely works with this sort of like I said, like pseudo anime, pseudo comic book style that they're going for with these games. And I think it makes it absolutely look distinct and absolutely worth just playing just based off its visual distinctions from Hades. So go check it out. All right, narrative. So of course this is just the best story in a game. Granted, it's not the most important part of a game, but it is the focal part of a lot of games. And, well, tends to also be a very important category for the Game Awards with Jeff Keighley onwards. So, what games do they think have the best story? Well, I think it absolutely makes sense to have Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 on here, as you're basically just following Sir Henry as, well, he tries to get all the way back to becoming a member of the royal court, but it's the journey it's the journey to get to that point is what's worth it. Silent Hill Hef, obviously, I think this one is an absolute must in this as well, as it pretty much focuses on the whole thing of like not just like the origin of like the curse of that was kind of associated with Silent Hill, but also just kind of being a bit of a criticism of a lot of like the Japanese stereotypes of the time. So, or at least like Japanese beauty standards of like the 1960s. And Hanako's sort of struggled with that. And then with Ghost of Yotai, I'm so sorry. You can probably tell I'm looking up the names of everyone. I'm sorry. There's just so many games. But yeah, no, and yeah, Atsu's sort of I'm so sorry. God, it's been a long year, so it's like I've been through a lot. So, but no, Atsu, kind of avenging like the death of her family, but also trying to learn like the ways of like the ghost. I think is a pretty unique struggle. So. I already mentioned this though, Death Stranding 2. I mean, Norman Reedus, I respect you. Hideo Kojima, I respect you. This is just not my style of game. Yes, your story might be better than the original, but again, I have to play the original in order to understand this, and I frankly don't want to do that. So, I'm sorry. And then Clair Obscur, I actually am gonna be honest. I actually don't know what the story of Clair Obscur is. I really don't. Like, let me look it up so that I'm not looking like a fool. Okay. Okay, so they're going. Okay, so it's basically, well, it's an expedition. Okay, so it's an expedition, going to like a city, and you're following like a group, and they're the 33rd expedition of this group. Okay, fair enough. Unfortunately, though, or fortunately, it was the winner. Again, I'm sorry, I just don't know if I want to like. You see what the problem is with the 2025 Game Awards, and this is even something that like, even whenever I was watching last month, I was starting to get kind of annoyed with. I mean, all my friends were getting really fucking annoyed with. I mean, you guys heard at the end of it. My friend Nate was getting sick and tired of Clair Obscur winning every single award. It was actually like, it annoyed him. And again, it wasn't the fact that the show itself was bad. It's just the fact that Clair Obscur was absolutely sweeping. And it was just so, like, it was just disappointing seeing a lot of games just get snubbed. So, because Clair Obscur was just getting all the awards. So, but I'll talk about that once we get to the Game of the Year. But suffice to say, I'm not nominating Clair Obscur on here. Again, I don't want to touch a game that has AI art in it. Like, I don't want to say that the game was written by AI. I think that would be a bit too far, but I don't know, man. It's like, it's too much. It's too risky for me. So what did I end up nominating? So obviously, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I already told you. Silent Hill F and Ghost of Yopoutai, those are all staying. But I'm also going to have Hades 2 on here because, well, yes, it is like, you're following the footsteps of Melanie, who is the sister of Zagreus. I okay, I'm not just gonna fully read that. And yeah, like her whole point is that she's trying to defeat Kronos, right? Like she's not like Zagreus where she's just like exclusively just wanting to get out of the underworld. Like she actually has like an end goal to take down a great baddie, which noble cause, especially considering that Kronos is a freaking asshole in Greek mythology. Oh my god! I mean, to be fair, all the Greek god, okay, Kronos is a titan. He's not like a god, but whatever. People in Greek mythology are assholes. So, but you get the point. It's a noble endeavor, and I do respect it. And then Split Fiction, I think that one's respectable because, again, it's like these two, I think they're a lesbian couple, I want to say, where they get put into, like, this dream thing, and then, like, the company finds out, and they don't like that, and then they try to, like, go through all these events, and it's, like, all sorts of shenanigans go through. Like, that's kind of cool. Like, it's a simple premise, but, like, it's the journey that adds to it. And then, of course, with the thing of blueprints. Excuse me. Okay, I'll be honest. It is admittedly a bit of a complicated story. There's a lot of like background lore for blueprints, but you're basically following. You're at the Mount Holy Estate, and you're just kind of like trying to figure out like all the secrets in there. I don't want to necessarily spoil it for anyone, but you're basically just trying to unravel like a bit of a mystery involving like the mansion that you're in. So, again, all of which are intriguing plots and narratives. But there is one game that I think pretty much stands out from the rest. So, let's go over that. So, the award for the best narrative of 2025 goes to Silent Hill F. Yep. Here we go. Silent Hill strikes again. But there's good reason for that. So, first of all, I mean, it's a pretty unique setting for a Silent Hill game. It's not set in Silent Hill at all. You're actually in like a rural Japanese town set in the 1960s. So this is before the original game. This is before Origins. So, and you can even argue that this has nothing to do with Silent Hill at all. I'd argue it's definitely more sort of the origin of the Silent Hill, like sort of like hell / curse thing that's going on in there. But even then, well, with that, and also of course it has like the creepy as hell flower monsters, like, and just it's a creepy game. But the reason why that like I think this is a good story is because, well, you're following Hanako's sort of journey through Silent Hill, or not, sorry, journey through like this hell version of her like hometown, and it's basically just a giant criticism of like the beauty norms in Japanese culture at the time and even nowadays. Because you want to know why it's like a bunch of like flower monsters and like stuff like that. That's kind of it went through. It's more so an analogy for the intense like standards that Japanese society kind of has. So that's why like that's a thing. Obviously there's also multiple endings in the game, so you can definitely like figure out how you want to interpret a lot of like the stuff that's going on with those criticisms, whether to embrace them or to like reject them. But there are multiple endings. And I would just argue that this is just a solid return to form for the franchise. Because here's the thing, Silent Hill has had a long history of just not being able to capture that same magic that, you know, the Team Silent era games had. Again, Silent Hill 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. I played through it back in 2022. I fucking cried at the end of that game. On stream, I cried. It was one of the best games I ever played. And this is the original game we're talking about. We're not even talking about the remake here. Just the original 2001 game was, I think it's an absolute masterpiece. And I have since played through most of Silent Hill 3 and 4. Thankfully 4 is readily available on GOG. I have to go out of my way to find 3. And nudge, nudge. But kind of after Silent Hill 4, it got rough because Team Silent was disbanded, and as a result, Konami at the time, they were trying to figure out what to do with the franchise. They made 2 movies and a third one recently, and they also reached out to a bunch of Western studios to make a bunch of other Silent Hill games. They made a prequel called Silent Hill Origins. They made a sequel called Homecoming. They did a remake of the original game called Shattered Memories, and then they released Downpour, which was terrible, and also Book of Memories, where they contacted Way Forward. And they were originally going to make Silent Hill F with Kojima, but then Fallout happened. That was a whole mess. So, yeah, I would argue, I mean, to be fair, the Team Blooper did remake Silent Hill 2 a year prior to this game, and that was solid in its own right, but it was a remake. It wasn't a completely new concept. This being a new storyline, I think, is a showcase of the return to form for Silent Hill, and I'm pretty excited to see where the franchise goes from here. That said, though, I don't think it's a good idea to have this be an annual series, as some of the board member leaks have proven. Please don't, dear God, don't make this a yearly franchise. That's the last thing you want to do with this. You tried doing that in the late 2000s, and it failed. So, don't do that. Alright, that then leads us to the game of the year. So, what is the best game to represent the year is basically what this is supposed to mean. So, because I'll be honest, 2025 was a bit of a rough year. We talked about the highlights, which, as we've showcased, not a lot. And even some of the games that I did highlight and gave wins to, people have problems with. Unfortunately, I think part of that is just because, unfortunately, we do live in such a hypercritical era where it's like, no matter what, you're going to get someone who's going to, like, not... Like, you're going to get a lot of pushback no matter what, with whatever project. Whether it's justified or not. That said, though, the Game Awards obviously has this as their thing. So, what did they end up choosing as their big nominees? So, they had Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Clair Obscur Expedition 33, Death Stranding, Lifetime Bonanza, Hades 2, and Hollow Knight Silksong as their choices for Game of the Year. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think this is even that bad of a lineup. It's definitely a better lineup than 2024's Game of the Year choices that they had. I would definitely say Kingdom Come Deliverance, absolutely worth it. Donkey Kong Bonanza, yeah, I'd say that's a good choice as well. Even if it's not like the choice that I would have done, I still think that it's a fantastic choice for Game of the Year. Especially if you want to choose a game on the Switch too, that's probably your best like pick. And then Hades 2 and Hollow Knight Silksong being absolutely legendary, crowning achievement games in their own right. But I'm not gonna rant about the other two games. I already explained why I don't think those are good choices. Again, granted, Death Stranding 2 more so just being it's just not my thing. If you love the game, that is absolutely fine. It's just not the type of story I'm really into. I'm definitely a lot more into like it's just not my thing. And then Clair Obscur, as we've talked about, I just unfortunately, as you guys already know, though, Clair Obscur was the winner. Obviously, whenever I saw this live, I didn't think that this was a problem at the moment. But because of the whole indie game controversy, like the old indie game label controversy and the AI art, and just the fact that there's just been a lot of just backing with this game, it's really just started to become a game that has kind of just put bad taste in my mouth. Because I'm just going to say it right now, and I don't know if people are going to agree with me on this, but this is kind of reminding me of 2020 with how they treated Last of Us Part 2. And if you guys don't remember that whole controversy, basically, that was another game that basically swept that Game Awards show. And it completely snubbed a bunch of other games. Clair Obscur, unfortunately, is kind of fitting in that category. And I think in this case, it's actually even worse. Because here's the thing, is, again, this game got caught using AI for its, background assets. Who knows what other types of, AI junk they put in this game. And, again, the fact that this was even nominated for Best Indie Game, it's not an indie game. It's just not. It's way too big of a budget. And, I mean, there's 70 or there's over 100 tracks in the game that are made by high-end composers. I usually don't like calling anything like this because, it starts getting into conspiracy theory crap, and you guys know I hate conspiracy theories. But I'm gonna be honest, this is probably the first example of a game that I have to say, this is an example of an industry plant game. You know how there's all sorts of accusations of music artists being industry plants? I mean, we've talked about bands like Sleep Token, who they're accused of being an industry plant. I've mentioned how 3 Days Grace is definitely a prime example of an industry plant. I just didn't know the term of it at the time. So, I think this is the first example of a game I can confidently say is the video game equivalent of that. And that's no disrespect to the people who worked on the game. It just kind of feels gross that this just completely swept. Especially since there's some games on here that didn't even get a single award. That's why so many, at least my friend group, were just so annoyed with this year's Game Awards. And in hindsight, I don't blame them. Because, Game of the Year, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Best Game Direction, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Best Narrative, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Best Art Direction, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Best Score Music, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Best Performance was someone that game had 3 nominations for Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and guess what? One of them won. Best Independent Game, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Best Debut Indie Game, which is also bullshit, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It's what the fuck? Oh, and let's not forget, Best RPG, Clair Obscur Expedition 33. It's what the fuck, man? Meanwhile, Hollow Knight Silksong, only award, Best Action Adventure. Silent Hill F didn't even get a win. Ghost of Yotai didn't even get a win. Kingdom Come Deliverance didn't even get a win. It's like, what the fuck? And of course, everyone was fucking mad about Sonic Racing Cross World losing to Mario Kart World with sports racing, but we didn't talk about that, so it doesn't matter. But you get my point. It's like, because the actual presentation of the Game Awards itself, it has gotten better. They really have a problem with what they're nominating and what is getting the wins. That's my problem with the Game Awards. So, but let's end on a positive and let's actually end up giving out my nominations. Keep in mind, some of these are more personal picks, but I don't care. It's my show. So, we are in fact keeping Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 on here, as well as Hollow Knight Silksong. But I'm putting Ghost of Yote on here. I don't fucking care what people say. This is a good game, and the fact that it got completely snubbed is a fucking crime. Why the hell was this not in the nomination process? And again, I'm surprised that Split Fiction wasn't even nominated. This was like the one game I thought was going to be the snub pick, because this is the type of game I feel like the Game Awards would have loved. It didn't even get a breath of no mention. It's like, what? I mean, it's not even my favorite game, but I still respect it enough. And then Doom the Dark Ages. Doom Dark Ages is a fantastic game in its own right. Even if you aren't a fan of the game, I still think it's a good enough game. And god damn it, I have to put Shantae Risky Revolution on here. I don't give a fuck. It's my list, and it's a franchise that I love, so I have to put it on here. It's been a while since we even had a Shantae game anyways, so yeah, like that's kind of like my default. Again, I did it to a bunch of other games that are like my personal favorites and put them in my Game of the Year nominations. But alas, it's about time we finally give the last award. Also, please, shut the fuck up. Alright, so here we go. The final award. So, the award for Game of the Year of 2025. Okay. How do I say it? Whatever. The Game of the Year for 2025 goes to Hollow Knight Silksong. Yep. This is the real Game of the Year winner. Why? Well, let me tell you why. First of all, this game is a complete refinement over the first game, as far as its gameplay and its its environments. Again, this is a beautiful looking game, which of course is the second point, beautiful atmosphere and combat. But like, if you just look at gameplay of this, it is a breath. Like, it's so breathtaking and stunning as far as like a visual like game is concerned. And its combat, like, it's a lot more fluid compared to the first game because I mean you're playing as different, Hollow, or I don't actually remember like the names of these. This is how you know I'm not like, I haven't kept up with like gaming in a while. This is how you know I've just been, you're Hornet. You're playing as Hornet now, and like because of that fluidity. Sorry, because of like the fluidity of the combat and just the boss encounters and just the map design, it makes for a very engaging game. And here's the real reason why this game deserves to be on here. It's because this is a testament to just the game development of this game and what you can achieve in a game that takes so long to make. again, Hollow Knight Silksong, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and Shantae Advance Risky Revolution are good examples of games that have had long development cycles, but we're still able to make it. Why? Because of the passion that's behind the developers of all these games. Because, like, so many games have released, long after, like, sequels, long after their previous game, and they do not live up to the hype. Why? Because of mismanagement and misguidance with the projects themselves. These games, and in this case, Hollow Knight Silksong, really just showcases the testament of Team Cherry at their finest. And like I said, this was one of those games that was a sequel meme. It was up there with Half-Life 3. It was up there with Splinter Cell. It was up there with Sly 5. It was up there with Beyond Good and Evil 2. It was up there with all of those games. And it absolutely was worth it. And I'll even say this. This alongside with the original Hollow Knight, I'll just say it right now. I can definitely see this being one of those games that can be seen as being one of the best games of all time. And this is the game that at the very beginning of the stream where I mentioned that, like, we haven't had too many, like, Elden Rings or, too many Helldivers out there. Like, we haven't had, like, that one game that's, like, a true testament to being considered to be one of the greatest games of all time. Thankfully, this is that game. So, in a year of just, okay sequels, bland sequels, terrible sequels, games that came from the dead 20 years later only to be, like, one of the worst games ever. In a year where Mind's Eye was the laughing stock, Hollow Knight Silksong rose from the ashes. So, and that's not to discredit some of the other games on here, which, of course, we'll get into the recap. But I definitely do think that this game deserves to be in that dialogue for best games of all time. So, but let's recap, shall we? So, best indie game went to Hollow Knight Silksong. Best action adventure went to Ghost Yote. Best platformer went to Shantae Advance Rescue Revolution. Best RPG went to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Best shooter game went to Doom the Dark Ages. Best sim strategy went to 2 Point Museum. Best multiplayer went to Tempest Rising. Best DLC went to Indiana Jones Order of Giants. Best remake went to Metal Gear Solid Delta. Best art direction went to Hades 2. Best narrative went to Silent F. And the game of the year went to Hollow Knight Silksong. As far as my personal top 10 games, again, this is just me personally, and I will admit there's a remake and a remaster on here, but that's because of just how much I love these games. In no particular order, or maybe, Shantae Advance Risky Revolution, Doom Dark Ages, Hollow Knight Silksong, Silent Hill F, Ghost of Yote, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, 40K Dawn of War Definitive Edition, Metal Gear Solid Delta, Tempest Rising, and 2 Point Museum. And as far as guilty pleasures and honorable mentions, then I'm willing to talk about that don't necessarily qualify, but I still kind of like them. We've got the 2025 Delta Force game. Yes, that came out at the very beginning of 2025. It was kind of a cool game, even if, like, subsequent updates kind of dropped the ball, especially with the Black Hawk Down campaign remake. Monster Hunter Wilds, again, I like the game. It just should have launched better. Atomfall was kind of a cool sort of British-y Fallout thing that they tried doing, but it wasn't as, like, popular as some people wanted it to be. But, Commando's Origins, it's kind of a cool real-time tactics sort of strategy game that was supposed to be like a reinvention of, like, the Commando series, but it wasn't as good as it could have been. Skin Deep. I actually don't remember what this was. I think wasn't this like a strategy game? Oh yeah, this was supposed to, yeah, this was a like a stealth shooter game that was kind of cool. You know, it was another immersive sim type of game, but it just didn't get the attention. And frankly, there were just better games out there. Oh yes, Suikoden 1 and 2 got remakes earlier this year. So if you like Suikoden, there you go. Yeah, I'm also giving FNAF Secret of the Mimic a shout out here because like I think it's at least gameplay wise definitely a continuation of Security Breach Ruin and that forward momentum of what that studio needs. It just needs a bit. It just needs a better, like, I think, aesthetic or like setting for it to really stand out. And also it does bring in a lot of like narrative problems, although that's less to do with this game and more to do with the Mimic as a concept, but that's a whole other conversation I don't want to have right now. Mafia the Old Country, this is one of those games that I think is like very divided. I've seen this already on like a bunch of worst lists, which I don't agree with. But it's not like the greatest game ever. It was just kind of a disappointing follow. It's definitely better than 3, but yeah. And then Lego Voyagers is kind of a cool sort of adventure sort of game, even if it does kind of tread the line of walking sim. But yeah, notice how like even the guilty pleasures for this year were, there's not that many. There were a lot of guilty pleasures I had in 2024, but 2025, that's it. Again, this year was just kind of crap. So, but that is it for the Caspian Game Awards for 2025. Like I said, I will be doing a Redux stream. But actually, before we finish up, I want to do a bit of a bonus. So, remember how I said that I did that tier list, right? Well, here it is. So this is the tier list I did back earlier last year. Remember, I placed 2025 in the C tier. But I'm going to be honest, it's probably closer to a D tier, at least in hindsight. Granted, it was a better year than 2022, but which year is better? Yeah, 2018 was better. So yeah, and I think I will continuously do this every time I do a Caspian Game Awards. So just update this tier list for you guys. But that is it for the Caspian Game Awards for 2025. If you guys did enjoy this and you're watching this on Twitch, of course, make sure you guys hit the follow button down below and try the bell icon. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit this. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe and the bell icon. I'm gonna try to do more YouTube and Twitch stuff again. It's just with everything that happened in the past like 4 or 5 months, it's just been really difficult to do so. So I do apologize for that. But let's just hope that starting once we get closer to the spring, it will be pretty cool. But if you guys want to check that out, of course, like I said, the follow, hit the subscribe. If you want to directly support the content, make sure you hit the subscribe on Twitch. If you can't do that, that's completely fine. But if you want to support the content in any other way, make sure you guys share the stream to other people and can be awesome. And also make sure you check out the Discord and all that fun stuff down below. Check out the SoundCloud. But yeah, either way, that is it. Hopefully I'll do that Redux stream probably closer to like May or June. I can't make any guarantees, but I'm pretty excited about that. But until then, I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good night and peace out. Bye.